Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Gym Life Podcast. This is an episode, Ben, it's funny. Ben, Pauli sitting to my left, folks, and I know everybody knows him, so I'll get into the other introductions in a minute. Somebody got on the other day and said, hey, I got a question. When can we do a expose on RPG?
Yeah.
We already got one here today. So many of you out there that know RPG pretty well in the strength community, and not just here in Michigan, but everywhere. You guys are very well known. Sitting to my right or on your left, as you see it, is Brent and Rosenbergh, Coach B-Rose. And then to my left, of course, to the right, as you see it, this is Brent Odziana, strength coach, mobility coach. And, of course, we know Ben Pauli here, who is, you're all three kind of in a way. And then on top of that, coach with current powerlifting. And then, of course, strongman, we hope, because we're going to try to get something out of you today about that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So anyhow, there's a lot going on here, as a lot of you guys know who follow the show. It's not too often I get four guests on at the same time. So we're going to do a lot of bouncing around here today, but we've got a lot of great information that we want to share, because just having these three people with me today is a wealth of knowledge. I'm going to try not to get lost in it all. I'm going to try to navigate it. Which is not going to be easy, because I'm like that student right now with the blank slate, as I am always when I sit with him.
Yep.
So now you three are going to blow my mind today, which is cool, because you're going to blow everybody else's mind too. So anyhow, Brent, why don't you introduce yourself formally to the audience out there, and then we'll move right around the table.
Yeah, so Brent Odziana, strength coach. I got into this whole world as a collegiate strength coach. Started out at Central Michigan University. Did my undergrad there, so I was an intern for 2 years, and then I got into the grad school, so got a GA-ship. So I was doing that for 2 years, and then so that'd be 4.5-ish years, and then I accepted a job down in Texas at Stephen F. Austin State University. Moved down there, was there for just over 3 years, and then it just kind of wasn't the world I wanted to be in anymore. It was just like political stuff, army bratish life. You know, you have to move around every couple of years. You don't know job security, things like that. So wife and I decided to we both just quit and moved back to Michigan, back to our home roots. And then obviously I knew he had the gym up at RPG there with Steve and them. And I was like, hey, I'm 40 minutes away from you. I want to get in there. And then it's...
How long you been with them now? They're at RPG?
2018, I
okay.
think it was.
All right, great. Yeah, about 4 or 5 years.
Right there. Yeah, 2018 is when I came up. Yeah.
How about you, B-Rose? Give me the backstory here real quick.
Oh, man. So, college athlete, played a little ball in college baseball. Got done. Looking for something to do. Decided the Border Patrol was the right decision for me. So, ended up getting a gig at one of your big box gyms. Working there, worked my way up to general manager. Under the guise of training for this, what I thought was going to be this elaborate, cool thing. Went through the hiring process. But a guy at the gym named Darian Bond, old school IFBB pro, brought Ken Jackson up or helped Ken Jackson get his card.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
Came up to me one day, is like, you're going to step on stage. And I was like, you're crazy. 2 years later, I was on stage, yada, yada, yada. Got into training. Went to a gym in Birmingham. It was Art of Strength, Institute of Strength. And we got really into functional. That's where I got into functional training, got into the kettlebell, the movement world per se. Took it from there, got a job at a PT clinic. Realized there's a huge disconnect. Had some people reach out to me for some kettlebell training at RPG. Ben and I met, and kind of was one of those going like, yep, we should probably do this. So he's like, hey, man, you got to get here. We got to do this. 2016, I was at the old, shortly after the old place opened, I was there.
Yeah, I wanted to add something. This was like, so me and him are so like-minded. This was awesome because I remember that was right when we opened, right? It was closer to, so it was, we were talking about, I don't even know if we were officially open yet or whatever, but it was, we heard, Man and Steve were telling me about how he was training, some of these people for kettlebell stuff. Me and him sat down and we had a conversation, and after this conversation, this was how important he was to me and to the whole vision of RPG. And then, my training with my people was I basically told Stephen Mann, I was like, I will sacrifice part of my pay and we can give some to him, like whatever the hell we got to do to get this guy in, but this guy has to be in full time. Like he has to be part of the legs of the table here. So
when somebody puts something like that on the table, you say yes.
Yeah.
That's a good part.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think for
yes.
both of us was, we like to think of ourselves, and we have tried to reach the mastery level of our space. And when you're in that mastery level, you can't really we know all the things that need to be done. So I kind of was like telling him like, hey, we're gonna run our own thing. Like we get to, we're the head honchos here in terms of the training. So we're gonna, because we've both been in situations where someone will try to look over you, like you in the PT world, or like me training in like other places that give me like a sheet. When I first got in the business, I'd have a sheet and they're like, oh, this old lady has to do some deadlifts. And I'm like, well, she can't even bend over and touch her kneecaps correctly. So let's load a barbell up. Hell yeah, let's go, whatever. So,
and it was one of those, and like I think on one of your last episodes or so, you're talking about your recovery from hip replacement.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where him and I were going, like, there's a huge disconnect between clinicians and people, and the end result a year, 2 years later, with return to sports stuff. And I don't know that it's anybody's fault in particular. I don't know that the clinicians are given the time to truly treat somebody in an ortho outpatient situation, nor do I think that the demand for them to understand the physical capacity of what you guys need to do is there. And that's through no fault of their own. How long can you send somebody to school and how much debt can you create? That's a whole different conversation. But it seemed like there was a lack of communication between the surgeon, the physical therapist, and then, what we consider ourselves like the end user, so to speak. And I'm going like, hey man, like we can all work together, but like at the end of the day, it's a pretty simple process. Load the tissue and don't be scared to load it, right? And like,
it's funny. I make that comment on that show. I always say bro science, right? Bro science, anecdotal evidence, because that really is kind of how we all operate.
Oh, 100%.
It really is. And then all of a sudden I say, well, I'll get smarter people in. We'll finally sit down and talk about it. Well, here we are, kind of.
Yeah.
We're going to get off on a lot of tangents.
Oh my God, forever.
And I get it, right? It's a complete respect for the science that's available out there.
Sure.
But unfortunately, there's just not enough information out there in one spot or everybody working together. And what I'm making the correlation here is that we got 3 individuals sitting at a table that are building sort of I want to say a business, because we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But at the same time, there's this sort of a collective that's going on where all this brain power is coming in, right? And it's becoming applicable knowledge then at that point from all angles, right?
Yeah, and it works so well. It's like if I have my clients or my athletes coming in, and I'm like, I have this much mobility knowledge, right, compared to his knowledge. So it'd be like I can navigate around a few basic things, but then I'm like, hey, I don't know this. This is my client, but we're going to send you to him because I know that he can take care of that issue that I can't take care of. Therefore, when he takes care of that, bounces it back to me. Boom. Now my guy's back off and rolling.
Or he's saying, hey, back this guy off of this. Let's add this in. This guy doesn't have the range of motion for this exercise, let alone the range of motion, the ability to even do it with a barbell on his back.
Yeah.
Whatever that is,
Yeah, and I love the dynamic, right? Because I've seen it. I've been around and I've had enough conversation with you to understand how it all works. Mm-hmm. But really kind of what I'm seeing as we're watching sort of the evolution of strength coaching take place, because you guys are all sort of, I picture like when I had my problems with my health and stuff, right? This group of like got doctors from house sitting in a room and shit, trying to break down the problem on a chalkboard, saying what the fuck's wrong with this guy, and that's essentially what we're seeing.
Well,
here.
that's all that we do. So it'll be after the morning session, at 9, 8:30, 9 o'clock, as we sit there and we start crunching these problems. So like a year or so ago, we had the SI joint problems going on, and that's very common in the strength training world. And I'm like, dude, I'm done with this. We're gonna fix it. So how do we fix it? And we started whiteboard. Whatever, we were doing exercises, we were chatting about what's really going on here, and then cut to, now we have a solution, and now we have 0 SI joint issues going on with any of my athletes online, and then all of our athletes in person. They're gone because we solved the problem. And I think that, I don't know if it's a sales point or whatever, as a lot of these people are going to make you think that that's what's really going on, and it's really not. But we're in there not getting paid, and we're just wasting our own time, not wasting, but you know what I mean? Like, we're dipping into our own time to solve these issues that we have guys, same thing with the shoulder. If we have a guy with shoulders, like, he has no obligation to help me out with this athlete that I am stumped on, but I'm like, I'm throwing everything but the kitchen sink at this guy, and his shoulder will not stop hurting while he's benching. And I'm going to fix it. So, and I ask him about it, and then we start going down the rabbit hole. Or I ask him about it, and he's real good with the coaching cues and stuff. I go, what do I need to tell this guy to get him to move better? Whatever it is, we start just, throwing ideas, at the wall and see what sticks, and then we come up with a solution, and then we go to the next thing. And then there's always, going to be something with these strength athletes.
Brent, it takes a certain kind of mindset, right? Because ultimately in this industry, as we know it in coaching, it tends to be a little more cookie cutter because the effort doesn't want to be put in.
Right.
Can I make as much money as possible? Or, like you said, it's a nonprofit sometimes.
Yeah.
But it becomes more about the individual coach and wanting to really try to solve a problem to create a better athlete than to sort of glaze it over and say, well, we'll get through this and move on to something different, or just stay away from something entirely. What you guys have essentially done is you've put this onus on yourselves to, sort of say, okay, this is not only growing my clients, but it's also growing me. I'm gathering there's something said about that.
Yeah, because it's like when my athlete, I send him to do something, like even though it's his paid session, like I'm there just watching and I'm just sitting back and I'm like, okay, well now I learned that little piece, and now if the next guy runs into that same issue, I may be able to tackle it a little bit deeper now, and now I have that knowledge in me of how he maybe fixed his hip mobility a little bit, or something, or what was that activation drill that he did that boom, it just because majority of the time, right, it's almost like with strength. 99% of this stuff is going to work for 99% of the people. It is what it is, the basics of everything.
Right.
So generally, you're going to start to see just common issues, like you said with the shoulder, right? The shoulder, the hips, just mobility stuff. That's all common stuff that's always going to happen. And so there's usually a common solution to pretty much solve most of the stuff. Granted, injuries, whatnot, it might happen, but it's like, if it's so that's like where I can now take that, and then it's like, okay, well, I'm going to start just putting that in the program before that even happens.
Right.
And
okay. Now we're kind of talking about prehab now.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. And
that's a big word these days. Everybody loves that buzzword.
Yeah.
Prehab.
Yeah.
And what I will say with both these two, right, is I don't think people understand how often these two are in the gym with me. Not even with me, but with me a lot. When nobody else is there, in the middle of the day on their day off, and we're sitting there and we're screwing around trying to figure out, okay, hey, I've noticed tons of clients have this, hey, I'm having an issue going this, what can we do? And it's not like they're coming to me for the answer. They're coming to me so we can start a conversation, just like we're having here.
Right.
It's a conversation.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer. I don't know yet because I haven't seen what's going on, but we all help each other kind of get to this point. And as we're talking about like prehab, rehab, know that if you're a high level athlete in any sport, power walking, I don't care. There's a cost of doing business at some point.
Absolutely.
There's absolutely a cost of doing business. Our job is to mitigate that cost. So your investment is, in terms of bodily harm, is as little as possible. But there is a cost of doing business. And these two are experiencing that cost because they're both at a very high level. So it is an incredible case study with these two to try to figure everything out, right? It's still, I'm nowhere near as strong as them. I don't claim to be whatever, but I get to see some pretty wild shit on a given
listen,
day,
it
right?
goes without saying in that facility, not just with these guys, but
correct,
absolutely.
Correct. I mean, his wife is the strongest female in the world. How much? What's the weight class?
Yeah, the 123 weight class.
It's insane. She's an all-time
All-time world record.
Yeah, right.
Be clear about that.
Yeah.
123. You said we're going to get that. In a minute.
When I'm out in public and people, what do you do? And I'm like, I don't even know how to begin to explain to you what I encounter on a given day. Because
this is what's great about him though, is that like we're in this like ship and we're floating around, and he is great at just bumping it, and it's always going to go in the right direction. And so that's where we start to everybody starts to feed off each other, because he's a wizard at like following the breadcrumbs and figuring it out. And I'll just be like, all right, this hurts. And then we'll just start doing checks. And that's what it gives you a different level of respect for him, because it's not like, you get these coaches nowadays that they want to sell this persona like they know every single thing. And like the way that we go about it is like, hey, we're going to figure it out for you. We're not going to say we know everything, but we're masters and we bust our ass to figure it out. And so that's kind of what he does, is he's like, hey, come in and let's check it out and we'll figure out what's happening. It's not like, hey, I know the answer right off the top of my head.
Right.
And then, all of those scenarios that we build up of working through those problems, it makes it 10 times easier. And like we were talking about, I think this term of like, whatever, like customized programming, I think that just kind of like this like buzzword that goes on in the training world.
Really is.
And it's like, some of the stuff, it's like we're powerlifting, man. It's like squat, bench, and deadlift. You can only specialize so much. It's like, all right, let's say the guy was like a conjugate guy. You want to use a million different bars and bands and pulleys and all this crazy shit. It's like you're still squatting and benching and deadlifting, so it's not really going to need to be specialized that much. We've actually seen, as of late, we have the hardest guy. People kind of misconstrue this. They think that, it's like a coach at Alabama, where you got a good program and then you get the best guy, and then it's just they just go and do their thing. It's like, no, that's not how it works in strength training, because the law of diminishing returns and the stimulus response curve and everything like this, where the strongest guys are the hardest to adapt.
far.
And so we're seeing, but what's crazy about this is now with all of our stuff combined, we're seeing when we don't specialize and we generalize more, we go back to the basics and make them masters of the basics, the strongest guys are getting that big jump that we don't normally see. We like, you get guys to like this elite level, and we're talking about, I'm not even talking like elite total official. I'm talking about elite is in like the top 10 guys or on that list of top 25 guys to ever do it in their weight class. We're seeing these guys, 50, 100-pound jumps in their totals, when historically at that time you're seeing you're scratching and clawing for 15-pound PR.
Right. Much smaller returns on that. I think it goes without saying that sometimes we do overcomplicate this mess a little bit, right?
Yeah,
Would you
sure.
agree? I mean, I often say it again in my bro science and in my podcast when I talk about it. I try to keep it real basic. You're lifting shit up and you're putting shit down. I mean, let's not overcomplicate it. I get it. There's much more to programming for that. But I think everybody trying to put their own stamp on shit is just completely like muck shit up to the point where the simplicity of it has been lost.
Can't reinvent the wheel. It's
Yeah.
How many times have like guys 15 years ago even said that you can't reinvent the wheel, and here we are 15 years later. Like, we're not coming up with anything new. It's just
And that's kind of what I'm getting from this conversation. Essentially, what we're doing is we're just putting minds together that kind of own their sort of corner of the room or corner of the gym and understand kind of a little bit about each other's position and what you're doing to work together.
Well, if we were in like a clinical setting, this is the way, like what he was saying, this is the way that it should go. The surgeon should be speaking to the athlete. The surgeon should be speaking to the PT. The PT and the surgeon and the athlete should be speaking to the strength coach. All these people should be intertwined instead of the current paradigm is we're over here. Hey, that PT's an idiot. They're not going to rehab this guy to the capacity that we know that he needs to be.
Right.
And then the strength coach is going to do something completely different. And then the athlete's just kind of sitting there like, hey, like, what am I supposed to do right now? I want to go harder, but should I go harder? Because he's telling me not to. You're telling me that we need to move. You're telling me I need to rest. Let's lock the joint down. Let's move the joint. What are we doing?
Correct.
Well, and I think what B-Rose, what it kind of says to me a little bit is the only time we really ever see that is at the very highest level, right?
Correct.
So essentially what what you guys are offering is it's more of saying, hey, you don't have to be a top level athlete, a pro, with these big bank accounts and these wizards in your corner to get you back to blowing out a knee and back to, training or it's playing within 6 months. It's still accessible to the common man too.
Well, and to play on that, it's like when I even get a new client, even if he's just a general health person and he has no desire to compete or anything, I always try to push him to come in the morning, just not for the fact of like my convenience or anything, because that's like when I train and he trains. It's more or less that now I already know that I have another set of coaching eyes on that person.
Yes.
And then that way, because we run like a group training, so everyone's training. But now that person's getting to see, like, well, we got a nice little morning crew going out, too, where it's, some of the strongest guys in our gym are all competing in lifting right at that same time. So not only does that Gen Pop guy get to see, the strongest people that he's probably ever seen in his life, but if I'm grabbing a band in the back and my guy's up there doing an RDL and it's wrong, like, I know he's going to fix it for me. Like, it's so it's just everybody, like, he's not getting paid for that client. I'm getting paid, and I'm not even there to coach him for that second, but here he is over there coaching him. So
what's crazy about that is I realized, after we kind of talk about this all the time is, we start to, you go out into the world, and when you're immersed in this powerlifting life and around these giant humans all the time, you assume that's normal. And then, like, for me, like, I get it really bad because that's just all I do. So I go out, and then people are like looking at me like I'm the biggest guy. I'm like, dude, I'm a small guy in my gym. Like, what the fuck? And so, like, this whole thing just kind of starts to morph your brain as a human being and like how things go. And I noticed it like when just the etiquette in our gym is that imagine walking up to a guy at an LA Fitness and be like, hey, bro, that squat sucks, man. Let's fix that. He's going to be like, what's up, bro? You want to fight? Like,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like, I
talking
think you had a story about that on one of your podcasts about talking to one of those young kids, right?
Yeah, right.
But stuff like that. In our gym, we're establishing a new etiquette of, hey, it's okay to be coached. So if someone comes, like I tell them, it's like, all right, here's a handful of like 5 guys. And if they come over to you, you shut the fuck up and you listen, and then you do what they tell you you're going to do.
Yeah.
Or what you're supposed to do. And so it becomes this thing where it's not an ego thing anymore. It's like, all right, hey, they're just going to help me, and I'm just going to listen, and then I'm going to get better. And now when people get stronger from that, then you see them, and they're just like an open book. So you get guys that are staying after.
Right.
He's got like one of his guys, Matt, and he goes over, and he's like, look, watching me from the corner. what the fuck's this guy looking at? And then all of a sudden, next day he's doing the same thing I was doing because he's trying to learn.
Yeah.
Because he's understanding that the more knowledge he gets, the stronger he's going to be.
That certainly is the culture, but there's a bit of philanthropy involved too on you guys' end. Listen, there is. You're providing this knowledge just simply by being there. Right? You're not like a lot of like closed book kind of the coaches, right? Where if you're not paying me, you're not getting what I know.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you little breadcrumbs until you kind of buy in with me.
have-
But you guys don't seem to operate like that.
That's how I learned. It was my first 2 years of interning. My mentor, Rick Perry, who I worked under, it was come in, shut up, and just watch.
Yeah.
And I did that for 2 years, and like that's how I learned. It was just watch what they do. How do they coach? How do they cue? Try to follow the program, the X's and O's, which is just 1% of coaching at that level. It's all motivational cueing and making sure kids are doing it correctly. But it was just observe and pick up what you can pick up and then try stuff.
B-Rose, I want to ask you from a mobility standpoint, right? Because you're that guy everybody wants. It seems like nowadays. Ben, 20 years ago, fuck all that. Mobility, what was mobility? But right now...
I would agree with that statement.
Yeah,
About 15, 20 years ago myself. Right.
I didn't even know what mobility was back
Neither.
then. SI joint? What the fuck is that?
That was like, they like the old football
Greek?
coaches would have been like, that's like yoga hippie shit.
Exactly. The holistic stuff.
Would you say through it?
Yeah.
But it's certainly now it's almost like your position now. Not to make it any greater or any less than any other position. It's a necessary part of the machine. If you don't have that, well, essentially, our body, right? If we're not correcting making these adjustments, performance is always going to be at 70%. I mean, it just isn't going to happen.
Well, it's if the sum of the parts is still the parts, right? So like if the parts don't work efficiently, I don't know how you could ask the sum to work properly. It's just like
Right.
break it
But
down.
boy, years we tried that, right? Just gotten through shit.
Well, one of the best analogies he gives to the guys, and you can elaborate on this, but like our athletes and stuff, is he's like, you're not going to be 100% as like a functional high level athlete. So we just have to be as efficient with that 85 or 90% as like, and you see this out of guys all the time. You see these monster waves in their totals, and then they see the big jump. And what's the big jump? It's just they came in healthier.
Correct.
Once they reach a certain skill acquisition of strength, then, you just have to be able to do what your body can do. And that's it.
How often do we see people operating at that efficient level? Because I know, right, we all want to be there, but realistically, we're not really there most of the year, are we?
No, and this so there's if any of us figure that out, we'll never have to work again, right?
True.
If we figure out that, but that's our goal, right? And as long as we've been doing it, it's still an evolving process throughout time. And this whole idea behind mobility and functional training, I think, has been bastardized beyond belief.
Seriously, yeah.
But really what we should be saying is strength training for your joints. That's essentially what mobility is, right? And not to get too into it, but we have a couple things going on with respect to mobility, joint capacity. We have the passive range of motion, which is the prerequisite to all movement. That is like if I'm stretching you or bringing you up, and you need to have a huge range of motion. Passively.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? That's prerequisite for all movement.
Yeah.
But then inside strength sports or sports in general, we talk about this thing called active range of motion. That's always going to be less, or should always be less, than your passive range. But the goal is to bridge that gap. That makes sense.
Right. Yep.
And the whole reason, or at least the reason I look at it, or the reason why I like doing this, is because where are we strongest in this contraction, right? In our mid-range. The mid-range of the contraction is generally where we are strongest with weight. Well, if we start to expand the active range, inherently your mid-range contraction gets bigger. It has to by law. So you have more usable active range of motion, which is
even I can understand that. Sure, the bullseye gets bigger. Essentially, is what you're saying.
Correct. So
right.
I have more, and really what that is, and we talk about this, and I think fellas at the high level, at least from what I've seen, never competed there, of course. I want to be very clear about that. But it's who doesn't make a mistake, or who gets out of the shit and survives, kind of thing, right? Because
whoever's healthy is usually
more
more
appropriate.
I've never
I
had
like that
1,000
one better.
Right.
That's me.
Because
right,
at that level, with that much weight on your back, you have to, I think, because I hear all the time people that don't know, oh, they're using a suit, it helps. I'm like, you have no idea how hard that is. And if you mess that groove up at all, and you call even with 700-800 pounds on your back, how detrimental that can be. Yeah.
Well, people, like, we just had 2 meets ago, we had a double knee go.
Oh, yeah.
With a guy that had 600 something pounds on his back, which is kind of like
just
a normal squat now, but it was what was it, both quad tendons or something, a cellular tendon, broken bones.
Real quick, before we go on farther with that, I want to clarify for everybody listening. There are far more injuries with people that are not strong than that are strong. And what I mean by that is you hear some of the war stories in powerlifting and strength sports. And of course, there's, like I said, there's a cost of doing business.
Yeah.
But by and large, they are hurt far less than people that are sedentary, to be very, very clear. So, like, you should get, if you don't do anything, you should get off your butt and you should do something to be strong and challenge yourself, because that is how you survive throughout time.
But let's also be clear, when we see these blowouts at that level, they're much more dramatic.
Oh my God.
Yeah, no doubt.
It's a train wreck. It's not a bicycle crash.
Right. And,
Yeah,
and
that
they're-
happens,
and they're,
but yeah.
you know, sometimes they're on video.
But
which
yeah,
is-
they're more prepared to, I
Correct.
guess, circumnavigate an injury.
But something that we do see, though, so this guy particularly that we're talking about was one of our guys, and he had some nasty hip imbalances. He was loading one leg. He had a messed up SI joint, and we were constantly telling him, you have to get balanced out. And we were running into some quad tears. Usually when we see a quad tear, that means that we're overloading one side of the body from shifting over because our glute and our pelvic floor and all of our stuff is not working correctly. And we were warning him against this, and then I never wanted that to come true, and it actually happened. But this was what we start to see is, to your point of those catastrophic injuries, when we look back, there is a breadcrumbs leading to that
I was going to
injury.
say, the signs are all there.
Now,
Yeah.
when you have guys that are managing and trying to balance out their body and they do this stuff, when they do have what would be a catastrophic injury, they come back very, very quick. Their body bounces back, and it's not career ending like we see, what we used to see.
Yeah.
Because the body is a lot more adaptive, right? So we're not going to do this crazy catastrophic just detaching of limbs and stuff like that. It's going to be a lot more manageable. Maybe it's going to be, closer to just like a soft tissue tear, where it could have been, hey, we would have blown the whole knee out.
It's the idea of, and I think you guys would all agree, hopefully, at this point, but it's the idea of the old school, you blew out your back, get some muscle relaxers, get a shot of Toradol, and go lay on the couch for a couple of days. And we're going, no, you blow out your back, start moving. And in fact, the only thing we're going to do for the next 6 weeks is deadlift the shit out of something, because that's how we get better.
Now, when he says deadlift to show something, we're not maxing out.
No.
We're loading.
Whether
I
that's
try to clarify that
whether
for
that's
people
body
listening.
weight, hinging against the
We're- yeah,
band,
we're hinging.
whatever.
Active recovery, would that be active recovery?
You
right?
have to
Yeah.
move.
Yeah.
I mean, I've said this a million times. I cannot think of one situation in history where somebody was like, "Fuck, I was too strong for that."
Right.
So like, I
Right.
don't. It just doesn't make sense to us to not go like, "Yeah, I should probably be a little stronger."
Yeah. Well, I think it goes without saying, right? We've kind of watched, even the average person out there or the normal gym goer that's listening to this podcast right now, we can use examples kind of in time with athletics, the way we see things sort of taking place in our world right now, right? We can look at football. What, Ben, 10 years ago, you blew out your knee, you didn't work coming back.
Yeah.
Now you're coming back in 6 months. And
People are coming back from ACLs,
right. In large
Achilles
part,
tears, all
because of
this.
what you just said, you're preparing yourself. I hate to say this, but you're preparing yourself for the injury in some way, right?
Yeah, and I look at like he has a bunch of like real high level athletes that he trains, and I watch their program, and it intrigues me because I wasn't brought up in college. It was the GA unlocked the door. Here's a sheet. Bench, squat, do whatever you want. If you make it out, cool. We'll go run 5 miles, whatever. But I watch specifically. I can think of one. So he puts together what I think is a pretty masterful program, and he has one athlete in particular that is now playing a little college baseball. But he did some dumb stuff against our advice and decided to play a full contact sport after.
That's you, Logan.
Yeah, okay. I don't know if we call him out. Yeah.
Oh, this perfect opportunity. Call anybody out you want.
But I'm thinking, like in my mind, I'm going, well, this kid doesn't come back unless he's had Brent as his coach for the last couple of years. Like the kid's done.
Yeah.
Because separated his shoulder from what I understand. Whatever.
And
So,
this
like,
was one of those kids. This was a special athlete all around. I mean, this kid was like just manhandling like 700-pound deadlifts from blocks in high school, wasn't he? Right? Just
Like usually like I'll get an athlete. I'm not, I run the conjugate style. Like I don't just take them to pure max. Obviously we all know like their body's going to shut down before they actually reach their max. But the kid came in and I'm like, okay, today we're going to pull off a 6-inch block just to make sure you're like, whatever, good position, just a random variation. Pulls like 620. And I'm like, look at him. I'm like, holy fuck.
And we're talking kid here. We're
This
talking high
kid's,
school.
this kid's 15 years
Yeah.
old,
Oh,
16
yeah,
years
yeah,
old.
yeah. No, that even makes it.
And he's not even
crazy.
like big. He's just
Yeah.
I don't even like how to.
One of those guys,
Yeah.
like one of those tall, lanky guys that just deadlift really well. You're like, how does this?
that
guy
was
do that?
that's his
Yeah.
build and everything was perfect. And
Yeah.
I mean, not to sound like an asshole, but like for me, I look at when a guy can has skill across a lot of things, And then he gets hurt. I'm like, oh, that sucks. It's like, oh, this guy was, he specialized in hockey from 7 years old, and he gets hurt. I'm like, whatever. We don't need him anyway.
Yeah.
It's what it is. But you get a guy like Logan, I'm like, this kid could have dominated in any sport that he
I
wanted
think
to do.
so.
Yeah.
So.
Right.
Nothing against hockey. I played hockey. I coached hockey.
So what was the what happened? Was we still got him or what? Did we lose him according to Ben? Or
Yeah,
what?
no.
No, he's back.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
He,
Okay.
So I had him for 2 years, all through high school, and then got his Division I offer to go play baseball, and then so now he's actually just came back last week for winter break, so he's back in the
Nice.
gym.
Where's he
now.
playing at?
He's over at Wayne State.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah,
So so he's back
that
now.
strong and playing baseball. See, that makes me kind of sad.
Oh, dude, these guys, like, we
We
get a
kept
lot
telling
of
him,
these-
dude, do a powerlifting meet,
Yeah.
and then
What we're seeing a lot of the guys that, like, it used to be like, all right, football guys are the strongest guys, and now we're seeing it's like a lot more guys that just have better leverages, right?
Yeah,
And they learn how to live
right.
correctly. We're seeing baseball guys, lacrosse guys, basketball guys that are stronger than a lot of football guys.
Well, I think we attribute all that to what we're talking about with kind of this preparation for training. Right?
Well, I think it literally was that old system that kind of finally came to a head and just started ripping people's joints all apart and
Right,
stuff. And
right.
it's like the old football mentality was like, just go nuts in the weight room. And I think that by default of them having these higher level athletes and more in some of like the pure skill sports that aren't contact, like baseball and stuff like that, they're kind of backing people down and saying, or at least even in baseball, like, at a young level now, they're at least trying to do some rotator cuff work, right? They're still trying to figure some stuff. Like they're just saying, hey, we should prepare for the injuries that are coming. And when they do that, now these kids' bodies are a lot more resilient than these football players just going in. Like my old football coach, we would do military press, we do full clean, like into the front squat position, 3-rep max, and then we would do like a back squat and a deadlift. We do that Monday, Wednesday, Friday before the game.
Yeah.
And then we'd go in, and then, into the playoffs, everybody's wearing yokes or pieced together like a fucking mummy with knee wraps. Kids are getting cortisone shots like fucking Varsity Blues,
Yeah, right. It's true though. It is so true. Well, we could have a whole show on the comedy of all the. Well, we don't have to go back that far. That's the crazy thing about it. But yeah, it's funny. I like to kind of. I don't know if you guys listened last episode when I gave my bro science on my four letters of recovery, right?
Yeah.
And I'm starting to see here, maybe I'm not too far off because really patience, people, here's the people around me right now,
Yep.
right? Patience, of course, we have to have that. But mobility, right? We know mobility, you got to get that right before we build muscle.
Yep.
You would agree.
Yep.
And I kind of got that from you. I stole a little bit of that from you. I want you to know.
appreciate that.
Disclosure here, because talking to Ben enough, it kind of got me in this later part of my life even, understanding that without mobility, there is no muscle. You're just not going to build it without that, what we talked about, that range, right?
Correct.
That sweet spot, that middle that you're talking about where you're most strong.
Yeah,
Sorry to
go ahead.
But to go right off of that, like, I also, like, we can't confuse that with, well, that person can't go to the gym. Like, if it's his first day walking into the gym ever, we're not going to just put him on mobility, right? Like, we need to go through
Well, you have to have-
strength
yes, of
type
course.
of stuff to build that mobility. Because I think a lot of people get in there, like, because they call it, like, technique work, right? They'll sit there with a barbell, and they're like, oh, well, that's just not perfect yet. Well, it's like, well, you're just not strong enough yet to even get into the proper technique. So we
Okay,
need to
fair
build
enough,
that
yeah.
strength safely to what you can handle.
Well, okay, for instance, like what he's saying, for a lot of our guys, like with like our new guy Kyle, right, there's a bunch of mobility issues, but the mobility issues are stemming from him being just imbalanced everywhere. So he's like, are we going to do some? I'm like, we don't need to mobilize you yet. We're not going to mess with that. We're going to let your body balance itself out via the program I give you. And then we're going to start to see stuff open up and operate correctly. And then we're going to get a real sense of, hey, what is, what's actually tight here that we need to work on.
Yeah, I was gonna say that, and that kind of
Weak
follows.
points.
Yeah, I was gonna say that kind of follows like when I get together with somebody and I go, okay, take me through it, and then I go, well, what have you been doing? And then they go, well, nothing, and I'm like, well, that's not. You've never heard any of us say that ever. I don't know why that's a thing in your head, but here we go. It's the like master one thing first. So when we talk in terms of mobility, that they're absolutely right. Like, if you can't stand up from the ground, I don't know that we need to work on opening your hips up. We should probably work on standing up from. You know what I mean? Like,
That's a good point, because I guess when you kind of think about that, and I think everybody kind of needs to digest this that are listening to this podcast right now that don't know are at this level you guys are, you have to challenge sort of the body from a muscular standpoint to understand where those imbalances are coming from.
In majority of the
Ultimately,
time,
right? Because there's some growth that has to take place there.
Yeah.
We're not going to put 30 pounds of muscle on. These imbalances become kind of something you have to manage all the time.
Yeah.
I can only think, Ben, if you're 200 pounds and you're a power lifter or a strongman, and all of a sudden you jump classes to do 20, 230, you're imposing a lot of different issues on your body that wouldn't have been otherwise realized had you not gotten stronger and bigger.
Yeah, and I think a perfect example is I have just got a new female. She's a track athlete and didn't ever really lift in her life. Tall, lanky girl. And trying to, teach her through just moving scaps properly, things like that. And I'm like, well, she just might not physically even be strong enough to even move into that position. So let's throw in some super light face pulls, to build up some of the upper back strength. So now she actually has some strength to move that scap while you're laying on your back or something, or whatever it is. So it's kind of, you can almost.
Good point.
Well, so there's this huge overarching concept that people don't understand, and so let's say we like mobilize or we want to do some soft tissue work at a joint. Okay, let's say that it's like an ankle, right? If their anterior tib and all of the muscles that control the stability of the ankle and the function like that, if those are just kind of shut down, underdeveloped, I don't like to say shut off, but they're underdeveloped and all this stuff, right? If we get in there and we're like, oh man, your ankle doesn't look right, we just got to mobilize your calf. If we stretch the hell out of that calf and we mash at soft tissue, and there's the anterior tib and all the other stuff in that foot and that ankle is still not strong enough to do anything. So now the only muscle that had tightened up to provide some form of pseudo stability, we've just turned into mush. And so now we've destabilized the ankle to a hugely larger, greater degree, and now the whole ankle is just nothing. It's just flopping.
And like, oh God, we're gonna go on this tangent, but this is great. And this is why sometimes when we get somebody new and we realize that we have to develop somewhat of a strength platform, whatever that is to us, you'll watch us not give somebody a cue that has a terrible looking deadlift or terrible looking whatever. We don't care how they move at that point. We just need you to do shit to get stronger. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like
sure.
there's some stuff going on that we can't even see yet, and we're not going to know what that is until you develop even a shitty pattern at best. Like you don't have a pattern for us to assess yet. So I think sometimes people walk in, they're like, oh, they down deadlift with a rounded back or whatever. I'm like, yeah.
You can't really hardly correct that unless you build muscle.
Yeah, and if you don't know where you are in space and you've never done it before, are you going to understand? Hey, you need to get into an anterior tilt, or you need to get into a posterior tilt, or you need to drive the scap. That's too much shit for somebody that's never.
That's such a great point.
If they're at that level, their max deadlift, like to use that exercise, is going to be probably 60% of actually what they truly can even lift.
Sure.
So they're not going to get hurt.
They can't. They don't even have the physiological capacity to get to what would be a legitimate 1 rep max, or most of the kids that are young to a weight that would be heavy enough to really significantly hurt them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was working with a softball player yesterday, a collegiate softball player. God, I'm gonna roast some people here, but she was like, I have lower back pain. And I was like, okay, where? It was like, the SI joint thing or whatever. And so we started working together, and I was like, well, what did you do in PT? And she's like, we did some arm stuff. And I was like, weren't you there? What did your script? She's like, that's in my back. Without diagnosing her, the ER, whoever, urgent care, put her on muscle relaxers and prednisone, right?
Yeah.
Without, just that we go right to that as a society. But we'll get, again.
Right. I know.
And so my point to this is they didn't. I was like, let me guess, you did some clams, and she's like, no. I was like, did you do anything with like a core brace? She was like, no, we did like arm stuff, and I was like, but for your back? She was like, yeah, and I was like, wild. Let's try this. And it was a simple thing of she had no idea how to do anything. It was like you just don't know how to move. Couple cues, a little bit of breathing, bracing. She's like, lower back pain's gone. Did we do anything? Absolutely not. But we provided her body with the stimulus to deregulate a threat. And it just all of a sudden doesn't
Good
present.
point. Yeah.
And I think a lot of what we deal with sometimes is people don't understand the difference between pain and injury. There's a huge difference. Pain is a signal for you to go, hey, something's going on. It doesn't always mean you can have pain without injury, injury without pain. It's a learning experience. And our goal, I think, or my goal on my responsibility in our group is to kind of educate people that, like, listen, just because you got tweaked doesn't mean it's not an excuse for you to sit down and not do anything. Like, the important thing is that we have to do stuff and continue to learn.
I think the point from that to me is to stimulate, right? Because you can stimulate, and I'm a massage guy, right? So I understand it to some degree. Even that's a stimulation.
Sure.
You're removing that sort of discomfort. Doesn't necessarily mean it's an injury. You're just sort of adjusting to get it so where that point is relieved, I guess.
Correct. We're at least functionally there where we can, and every time we do that, we learn how to downregulate, or whatever you want to call it, downregulate the threat system in the body. So when pain comes up again, it doesn't send that alert into overdrive. It's going, all right, something's there, let's go figure it out. And that becomes more of a critical thinking issue than a holy shit issue, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
And
that
we
makes
like
sense.
that. We like that.
Well, what I'm kind of gathered from this portion of the conversation is really from what I see out there sort of happening in the real world, because we got to want to get on to this next topic we're going to talk about, which is what you guys are doing collectively. But what we're getting to in the real world these days is it often seems now that too many people then, according to what I'm hearing here today at this table, are looking at this sort of corrective stuff too soon. You see this programming that instead of getting yourself to the point where you can perform a 1 rep max because of what you just mentioned, they're doing all this sort of almost overdoing the prehab stuff that's not allowing them to get stronger to be able to perform, to assess.
They go about it in a like, I just want to put like a warning out there. We're not saying that we're just letting kids deadlift with a completely rounded back. What we're saying is that we're coaching positions, but if a kid gets into a little bit of spinal flexion, we're going to let him go because we want to, 1, build resiliency there. 2, we want stuff to get stronger all over around that body. We want him to figure out where he's at in space. And we know now that there is a larger range to what would be like a neutral spine and stuff like this, right? Now, in terms of the corrective stuff, people just don't understand what it is for what it is, right? So they're looking like postural corrective work is a drastically different animal for me than it is for Joe that sits at the computer desk all day and is tight. My traps are tight for a different reason than his is from being at a keyboard, and then the response is different. Now the diagnosis could look similar, but there's going to come a time where for like postural corrective, we see this all the time, like, hey, traps are tight, leave the traps alone, we'll do everything around the traps. And sometimes it's like, no, that area is hanging on for dear life. We need to do that area. We need to get that area stronger so then it can relax and not provide that pseudo form of strength that the body likes to do, which is tightness, and tighten everything up because it's holding on for dear life.
Yeah. I feel like we can talk for about 10 hours on this subject right now. I know B-Rose, I know what you're thinking. Fuck, this is a rabbit hole.
I had like 10 more things.
I know. Right. Well, I'm going to stop you right there, Brent, because this is going to go into kind of what we just talked about. Because I think, in something that I want to make sure we have some good time to talk about is you guys collectively are doing something a bit revolutionary. I wouldn't say reinventing the wheel necessarily, but you're kind of making a better wheel right now. And that's with this coachingrevolution.net that you guys are doing. Sort of, for those of you listening out there, I'll prelude that by saying everything we kind of talked about and more, of course, and we'll get into that because there's much more to this, leads into sort of what we're going to see from you guys now in 2023 as far as being able to offer this collectively.
Right, correct, yep.
Elaborate for me. Do a better job than I just did.
Yeah, so everything that we talked about, like that would be like 1% of what we're trying to offer, right? It's programming that instead of just giving you a sheet to follow and then you maybe send a video back and I give you a 2-sentence fix on that and then that we move on from there. It's more so we are trying to give you, like the sheet, your workout, and then when you send us stuff back, it's all of us collectively trying to analyze what is going on with that exercise, where are the mobility issues, where's the strength issues coming from, and then inside that site, we have all of these tutorial videos, not just like the 3-second guy doing 5 reps and like that's you have to mimic that, just watch that and then do it. It's us trying to, like we'll film videos every day where I'll be performing the exercise while Ben's pointing his finger around everything saying, this is where you are trying to feel things. This is exactly what the movement is. Now do them wrong. This is what it feels like when you do them wrong. This is what it looks like when you're doing them wrong. So with obviously not being able to put hands on someone that's remote, it's trying to give them what looks wrong, what looks right, what areas should you be trying to feel to make sure you're doing that right. If you don't feel these areas, reach out to us so we can try to give you almost another exercise possibly that then will funnel back into that exercise of now, like if you're trying to hold the scaps back in a deadlift or anything like that, it's like, well, if you don't know what that means, again, let's throw some band face pulls in there. Okay,
right,
I got that feeling.
of
Okay,
it, yeah.
So now I know what that feels like. So now let me try to take that now back to the deadlift and then boom, okay, I have some feeling there now. So it's like, that's what we are trying to do essentially different than just your everyday programming as far as the online world goes is just you get much more in depth with how we can try to relate to these
Yeah,
people.
because essentially how I'm understanding it is the way it's broken down is essentially the same sort of like you'd mentioned, Ben, where you have the orthopedic in the room with the surgeon, and you guys ultimately are all looking at the same thing. So when you're talking about coaching from that perspective and coaching revolution, it's not I'll take this one Ben and I'll take this one Brent and I'll take this one B-Rose. It's no, this is all a client that sits within the collective.
Correct.
So they're able to get every facet of what we're talking about, because ultimately that point, and then bringing in a bigger point of corrective measures to get better at performance.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were kind of talking like pre-podcast. As Ben has alluded to, like we all kind of have, I hesitate to call myself a master or anything, but we all have a shitload of experience in our particular areas. And we talk about it. I know you guys could certainly program mobility, some FRC stuff, just based off the last years of us doing it. Mm-hmm. I could certainly program some powerlifting stuff, but at the end of the day, I know they're much better at me than look at them, right? Look at just based off their experience alone and their competition standard. Why would I not want to give somebody that experience? He's programs for me.
Yeah.
Let's get that same experience for my people too, because I trust these guys that much, right?
And that's a bit of the disconnect right now with some coaching programming out there is there's not that ego set aside. It's like a guy can be solicited to coach, and most coaches aren't going to turn away that money.
Yeah, they're scared they're going to get stolen
even
from
if they can't tackle the problem or it's outside of their scope, they're like, hey, I'll just try and I'll experiment on this person and with their own money and then kind of mess around. Well, so the whole concept behind this, right? So we're making the site for the people like us, and we've lived it. We've had multiple coaches ourselves. We've had the online experience. We provide the online experience, and we're athletes, and we're coaches full-time ourselves. And so what we're looking at is all the years and all of the coaching that I received. I was like, where is the disconnect? And we kind of figured out that's where the disconnect is how do we get that online or that in-person feel, and how do we transform that into an online, what you're going to get online? And we started to figure out that it's not in the X's and O's, and it's not in just a video of me doing 5 reps, you copy it. It's in the breakdown. It's in these long, complex videos of these coaching scenarios. And so what I'm really excited about for this is we call it like the exercise bank, and now it's going to have all the normal videos on there just in case you want to look and just kind of monkey see, monkey do from that. But we're filming coaching scenarios, and it gets updated weekly and bi-weekly, and sometimes we update it daily. It just depends on how much we go through. But these are situations that we're running into in the gym. And we started to see this trend over the course of, all these years, is we're like, hey, we're explaining these in-depth concepts the same every so often to the certain people. And I'm like, that's where the special sauce is. So let's put those out into the world, and that's what's going to be on the site. So we run to a coaching scenario. We're like, hey, we're palpating somebody's scaps, and we're saying, hey, push down into my hands. That's how we get our back tight for the bench. And then I'm saying, hey, pull down into my arms with your lat. That's how you use your lat. And they're going, oh, that's how I use my lat. I always thought it was a different way because I only researched it and I had all this external stuff and never had anybody show me that. And then I say, hey, in the video, I say, hey, grab a partner, have him put his thumbs on your shoulder blades, pull your shoulder blades down, and then they're like, oh, this is how I use my back, and they've never understood that, right? So we put these it's more of a coaching scenario type of a bank, where it's all of this dynamic information that gets passed along, and it's literally going to be us working through problems. And we're going to have full training sessions on there, of our own exercise or our own workouts, so they can see the pace and see how it operates. And they're like, hey, how do you get through this in an hour? I go, well, I set up my circuit. Right. After my main stuff, it's already set up, and I just go right to it. And then they go, oh, that's where I was losing out on 15 minutes, whatever. Go ahead, I think you had some.
Well, it's just kind of like, this dude, Brent, has pretty much a coaching cue for any scenario you could ever come across. And, like, I can't tell how many times we've been sitting in the gym, like, going through, like, they'll come in and be like, hey, my shoulder sucks, or whatever. And we get 30 minutes in and go, we probably should have filmed that, because we just talked. Right. Like, that was, like, I don't say gold, but, like, that was some shit that only comes about organically, right?
Well, I think it's just because we have these conversations so much that it's just we don't even think anymore of like, this would help other people.
It'll almost be it'll be like a sermon type of a scenario at the gym, because we'll get athletes, we'll start bullshitting, all of a sudden there's like 5, 6 athletes sitting around, and then I'm like, I look over at them because I get annoyed when we're in our conversation. They come over to me, I'm like, yeah, do you have a question? What do you want? And they're like, no, I'm just here listening. I'm like, all right, and then I just get back to the conversation. And they just sit there and they listen. And then I realize I'm like, that's gold to them because they're picking up all of this knowledge. And then, you know, our job is like, hey, let's get that and put it out in the world, and then also figure out a way to translate it to the athlete. I think that's where a huge disconnect is with people that actually have a really deep and a good knowledge base. And we bitch about this all the time, you know, off camera and stuff, is that you get these guys that they want to coach their athletes with like biomechanically like correct terms. Like, so the fucking athlete has to have an exercise science degree to figure out what the fuck you're saying.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't care. I've had football. I've told these guys this, and I've showed these guys this. I had football guys that couldn't figure out how to throw their hips. You know, under like when they're doing a deadlift stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
I literally went behind this big ass motherfucker. I grabbed a stick roller and I shoved it in his ass crack, and his fucking glutes squeezed.
Easy way to get it
And I go,
done.
see what you just did? That's using your hips. All right, do that every time. Next set, throwing the bar off his back. I go, that is so caveman rudimentary, but I was just so sick of trying to explain to this kid. I'm like, picture me doing this. This is me doing this. Watch me. Watch this guy. Couldn't get through to him. So I went caveman. Our job as coaches, and this is kind of a side tangent, I'm sorry, but our job as coaches is just, these guys are coming to us to build the strength, right? You don't bring your car to a mechanic and ask him how the fucking engine works. You just want him to fix it, right?
Right, exactly.
So that's our job. I don't care what I say to you to make you move. Now via, you know, the Instagram warriors and the Instagram warrior coaches out there, they're gonna be like, oh my God, I hate that cue. You know, you guys, I hate the chest up cue in the squat. I go, guess what? I don't hate when my guys destroy all your guys on the fucking platform and out squatted by 200 pounds. I could care less. Now, yes, I do know that I don't want an open scissor position with the rib cage, and we need to brace the diaphragm. All that. I don't care. I already know that that's prerequisite knowledge for guys that have made it this long in the industry and the guys that I want to associate with, and I'm comparing my athletes to, right? So we don't need to go down this whole thing of like speaking in biomechanically correct terms. It's useless. It just eats up time and it's not needed. Like, yes, we all know that cue, but if my guy is rounding like this in a squat and I say chest up and then he squats better, my job is done. That's it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I'm getting off in a tangent, my brain, as I'm like glued to my fucking phone all day, because that's what I do, as you guys know. And I watch those. We'll just say those people, right?
Like
we all know
guys,
who they
they'll
are.
do like
it's
a
biomechanic nonsense, is what it is.
They
It's
go on like a
gibberish.
3-page series about how they hate some cue that a coach uses, and you're like, you have no idea the scenario the coach is in. Like sometimes I'm like, arch your back as hard as you can. And then every, you know, PT or functional fitness guy in the world, it's going to red light going off. Oh my God, you're going to open up your rib cage.
Well, those are the same people that say you have to squat with your toes pointed straight forward.
Yeah,
right?
toes straight, all this stuff. Like,
whatever.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
It is a mess, man. It is a mess. Well, and to take nothing away from these guys, right? They're just using book mentality to try to translate into athlete. It just doesn't work.
Well, it's a selling point, right? These guys want to use $10 words and they want to use all these biomechanical phrases because they think that it makes them look smarter to the outside world. And that may be true for some people that are, you know, ignorant to that fact. But it's just not, it's one of these things where it's like, all right, dude, you got to understand, guys, you know, anybody that is actually good, and the real ones know who the real ones are. We don't need to sit here and speak in biomechanically correct terms. We, even on my programming, and this is what we're going to do on the site, is I look at all these athletes, and no offense to you athletes, I'm like, you guys are idiots. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this program so cut and dry to where if you just follow it, you cannot mess it up. That's my goal, because I'm, especially online, because I'm not there coaching them in person. Now, when we have all these videos and stuff, it opens up some stuff I can do with the program, but I set it up to where I'm like, all right, the way that we're going to have you execute this exercise, you have to hit the muscle group that we're asking you to hit. And so even if you don't know anything and you've seen Joe Bodybuilder at your gym do it a different way, you're going to execute it somewhere in the realm of correctly, to the point where I can give you a couple extra cues and fix it up.
Well, you say easy, right? We're going to do it easy, but easy for you is not easy, because what ultimately, Brent, what you're saying about this bank, right? This wealth of resource, essentially. You're breaking down every intangible. You almost have to.
And that's where we're trying to make the difference of just giving them the $10 cue or whatever it may be. It's, hey, instead of us just saying like, you know, maybe type a cue into their spreadsheet, it's like, let's just try to provide them this whole video and give them at least that starting base.
Yeah.
And then that'll probably clear up 90% of the questions.
Yeah.
So now if you still have a little disconnect, okay, now that's where our art of coaching comes in to figure out, you know, shove the pole up the dude's ass.
Right, because it's not always that case. You're not
Exactly,
always got that
for sure.
house scenario, and like we have to like dig a deep dive into what the problem is.
Yeah.
90% of the problems are just
So
simple problems.
let's try to cover as much stuff as possible right away for that client or that athlete, whatever it may be. So then it's taken care of. Now they don't even need to waste their time of trying to send us, like, do the whole exercise wrong and then send us the video and then be like, then us trying to coach them through it. Now, like, they don't even get to it till week 3 of maybe doing it right. It's, if we can try to provide everything that we think might cover that, or what we have seen through the years of, this is going to go wrong, this is going to go wrong, this is going to go wrong, this how you fix this, this, and this.
Well, it's already,
right off the
we're
bat.
already seeing this all. So we have guys running on the site now in beta testing, and the product is just insane. These guys are executing almost better than the guys that I see in person. And I think, like you said, we talked about this before the podcast, but they can sit there and rewind it and they go, oh, okay. And everything is set up correctly. They're moving at a correct time. Work to rest ratios are all correct. They're in great shape. They're moving good. And it's awesome because, okay. Obviously, right, there's a business aspect to everything, right?
Sure.
And on the business end for us, we are running so much more efficiently as coaches because we're cutting down the time. Like, the time that it takes me to explain all this stuff without these videos and the system in place could eat up almost an entire week of communication between me and this individual. And now it brings it down to maybe a 10-minute conversation a couple times a week or whatever the hell they need, but it's significantly less.
With nothing lost in translation, which is the tough part when you're trying to deal with any coach, for that matter. Even if it's a coach that you trust, understand, and you've built some relationship with over the years. Ultimately, there's a lot lost in translation and a personal standpoint.
Yeah.
But the biggest disconnect with online coaching has always been, well, not only is there shit lost in translation, but translation in general isn't even achieved.
Right.
But this essentially is what you're telling me now with what you guys have going on and the way you're kind of delivering it, that delivery system of this coaching revolution.
Yeah, we're trying to make it so it's like, if you were online, we want it to be like you were standing right there in that gym with us while he is demonstrating how to do an exercise to me while you're standing there like, okay, yeah,
Now,
I got that.
Now, when we're updating this site, it's like a self-replicating robot. It's going to be awesome. Because every time we come across this new scenario, that goes into the site. And then when you've seen this kind of thing from the top down, you're looking down, you see this whole thing evolve. I've seen careers come and go and start and finish in powerlifting now. And you see how these things develop, and you can start to see that a lot of this stuff trends back to the basics, right? So we're going to have all of that stuff in detail covered. And then what's cool about that is like, all right, now there's a one-off here that we've came across. Now we film all the stuff that we need to about the one-off. Now, how many one-offs outside of that bell curve of human beings are we going to have? There's only going to be, just statistically, there can only be a certain percentage. And then once we have all that covered, we have all the bases covered, and then we can start to get even more in depth on the basic things that we have. And so it just kind of expands upon itself. And it's going to be, when we get it the way that I want it, and this is going to be like as we grow, it's just going to be something that has never been put in place before, because just the logistics of it, they just could not have been able to do.
Well, anytime you have a bunch of bros trying to figure out some high-tech stuff, there's going to be a few logistical issues.
That's why we got Chris.
Yeah, we have an IT guy because I can barely operate Instagram.
I'm
some
trying
of those
to figure
group
out
texts,
Google
he needs a
Drives.
whole team just for some of the
B-Rose, what is the most challenging aspect of this from a physical prehab rehab standpoint? What would be considered the most challenging?
Well, on my end, like how I look at
Yeah, because that to me seems like the one cog in all this as somebody who would want to participate in this.
Yeah. So
what am I seeing from you? I mean, how hard is it really?
It's fun. Before we go into it, it's fun. And I think, while I think my role is instrumental, I understand that like what I can provide is supplemental in a very important way. But at the end of the day, people need to get strong based off what we're doing, right? That's the meat and potatoes of this. But in order to maximize that efficiency, like I feel like I have an intrinsic role to play in that. And I think the hardest part of all this is the dosing of everything, right?
Okay.
And we talk about it like we want to kind of like, as people peak, let's say, just as a crude example, as people are peaking for strength, we start to wind down the effort and the mobility. But as we're kind of winding down from that strength, kind of coming into our off season, we start to up the pressure of mobility, right? So we're kind of have this undulating wave where we can keep the neural drive high all year long and still make gains. So the next time we go to peak for strength, now we've added that and it's just figuring out that dose, because the thing that always happens, and this is the hardest thing I think to do, or one of the harder things I think I do with online folks, is like you can't put your thumb on them because you can't force them to come to the gym. And while we have to go off the inherent trust that, like, yeah, if you fill out your sheet, we got to trust you did everything. Like Ben and I talk about this, and we talk about this all the time. People come into Ben and Brent all the time. I want to be a Division I athlete. I want to be the best powerlifter in the history of the universe, or get up on the RPG's Wall of Fame kind of thing. And then we're watching him, and it's like, well, he's only asking 4 days out of you. You're only asking 4 days out of your athletes, and they show up 2. They show up 4, but they're there for 35 minutes or 40 minutes. And I'm going, well, what kind of drive is that? So, like, trying to figure out how to make sure I'm not giving them too much, giving them just enough, making sure we're doing enough.
Well, I would say there's a practicality sense to it as well, right?
It's like
where we run into is that there becomes an inherent barrier in terms of we have to be a good salesman at a certain point, not in terms of like monetary value, but sales on the importance and the completeness of the program, right? So what a guy's going to do is, if he has a 9 to 5 and kids and stuff, and he's only got an hour and a half dedicated, what's he going to skip? He's going to skip warm-ups. He's going to skip activation. He's going to skip mobility, right?
Sure.
So again, I said, these guys, I think I'm like, all right, you're a dummy and you're an asshole, right? Even though I know they're not, but that's how I'm going to program it. That way, if they're not like that, they get even more, right? So we have to look at it in a practical standpoint. It's like, all right, they don't have an ART guy. They don't have access, right? They're already spending their extra disposable income on our program. So we have to be able to put, how do we rig up a soft tissue release? Where do we put it in terms of time? Where do we ask them to do it? Do we superset it with stuff to make sure they get it in? Do we put it in on the off day? Do they have time on an off day to do it? Do they have extra time outside of the 4 days? Whatever it is. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and because of that, like we have an incredible part of that exercise bank is a bunch of the mobility movements with in-depth explanations. But, unfortunately, a lot of the time I get better buy-in once people kind of mess themselves up and they get back and they realize the intrinsic value. Like, just
well, we know this as athletes, right?
Yeah.
You're probably working on your hip now more than you did before the hip got destroyed.
Right, and it's just
like right now, I'm like, I am, what will it be? I'm 11 weeks out from a tricep surgery. And now my left arm that got surgically repaired is larger than my right arm because I was like the rehab turned into actual work into hypertrophy. And I'm like, wow,
there's an imbalance.
My injured arm is larger than my good arm. So now I got to go back and fix this,
Yeah, that is true. But there's a level though of, I guess, because the bigger picture is when we're talking about you working with Coaching Revolution, there's a customization to this as well. I get that all these pieces and parts exist, but ultimately, that's kind of where the conversation starts, right? What are they coming to you for specifically?
Yeah, so there's going to be tiers, right? We're going to have templates. We're going to have templates of a bunch of different kinds, right? We have linear, we have conjugate, we have DUP. We'll eventually probably have some 5-3-1 stuff on there. All kinds of stuff that you can get like that just click and then you follow it along. We have different levels of buy-in, right? We have our normal programming. We have programming plus mobility, right? We have programming plus mobility and nutrition, which would be like the top tier, everything like that. And then, we're going to do some stuff like if we customize it, we can set up some FaceTime videos or some whatever the hell those are called, Skype calls, whatever whatever
Zoom
the kids
these
call them
days.
nowadays. I don't fucking know.
Zoom.
And Zoom. Yeah,
This guy older than I am? What's going on here?
I don't know. I'm terrible at that stuff. Well, yeah. So like, we're going to be able to customize it as much as you want, but again, I want everybody to understand that I don't think that a lot of that stuff. I think that they're going to be able to get a lot more out of just the bread and butter, like let's get the programs going, and even buying the templates. Like I was explaining to this about this before the podcast. These templates are not like, hey, I wrote a template for a 12-week peak, right? This is templates that we've peeled out of hundreds of athletes over years and years of peaking. And then I took all the best parts and I plugged it in and I go, this is a template that I feel I can put my name on and get an actual result. Because these are legitimate templates that actually work. It's not just I'm writing X's and O's down. It was, I wrote an X's and O's down, and then this guy was, fatigued at week 5. So how do we form fit that? And then I test it on the next guy, and then we tweak it, and then I go, hey, this guy should have peaked a week earlier, and then we tweak that, and then after years and years of that, then we devise this template. These aren't just like random X's and O's, how I would write a template for, like we wrote in strength and conditioning class for like a 12-week, prep, which what a lot of these people say is when they're writing templates, these are just one-off templates that they're writing off the top of their head. Now, it could be effective, but I'm saying these are tried and tested programs that got form-fitted into templates. And then, just to talk about what would be on the site a little bit, we're going to have, there's going to be articles. It's going to be, remember the old way back, like the Deep Squatter like website and all that crazy stuff, right? You'd have these articles and forums and all that stuff. And like old sites like Elite FTS or even the West Side site, right? You see all this stuff on there and it's like, this is awesome information. But then there is a million people have done this with the West Side program, right? They read the book or they read the articles and they can't put it into practice because there's something lost in translation.
Huge disconnect.
Huge disconnect. Or even bodybuilding.com, they run stuff and it's like not the same. They don't understand work to rest ratios, or they don't do supersets correctly. Their form's all terrible. We're going to put all this in, and it's going to be translated for you, and it's all going to be in one place. So if you read something in an article that's on our site and you're like, oh my God, this is pretty cool, I feel like I'm doing this or this is going wrong, you can click it, and then you can see a video. We can explain the whole thing, and then say, hey, this is what it would look like in a program, and then this is what it is in the program, and this is how you would execute it, and the whole thing from square one all the way.
It is truly it's a revolution for sure, but you're just essentially you're pioneering just the idea of just putting this information all in one place now. Because I love the reference you made, or the analogy between West Side and how we interpreted it, right?
Yeah.
Because we all read the fucking book. Give me a break. Nobody was putting that shit.
95% of people have no idea what's going on with that type of a programming, and they
got the box squats and the jumps.
That's
down.
it.
They think that we're doing box squats and bands and chains and all this stuff. It's like there are no exercises.
Yeah, unless you were down there being coached by Louis himself, you weren't figuring this shit out, or finding some student of his, or now we've got a larger family tree out there, obviously, with you guys as well. Yeah. You're still not getting to the bottom of that shit.
Even old school hardcore linear periodization stuff people have no idea what's going on with running it. And even like on the side of the conjugate guys hating on the linear stuff, they're hating something that was a bastardized child of something that wasn't even supposed to come up.
Right.
It was like the people, their interpretation of linear periodization that sucks for everyone was not the way that it was even supposed to be made in the first place. And then you get guys over here on the conjugate side looking at that. It's like, well, you're hating the thing it's not supposed to exist. So I understand why you hate it, but it's not even a real thing in terms of like what it's meant to be.
Everybody wants to tweak put their own name on it.
They do, and that's really where the problem starts.
Yeah, they try to take a little piece out of every single program.
And I'm standing in the background because my favorite thing is, if you haven't been to RPG for a lift on a Monday night or a Saturday morning, it's worthwhile just to come down. And what I love is sometimes when I have a client, maybe a newer client that comes through on a Monday night, or even in the Monday mornings, which are pretty hype as well. They just have that turn and their eyes just go, what did I just walk into? And I'm like, nobody bites. This collection of individuals in this gym are the first people on earth that would help the 90-year-old lady on the leg press be like, listen, I love the fact that you're in here. Let's go. Right? It's odd because you walk in there and you have this, we're talking about like the collection of some of the biggest humans that I've ever been around on earth. And they're all over.
Multiple 300,
right, and like to me,
humans.
like to us, that's not like, yeah, you guys are big, but I've seen bigger, right? But people that don't have that experience are like, does Ben fit through a door? Does Steve fit through a door? Jesus, Brent's back is this fucking wide. I'm like, yeah, they're all right.
I know,
and then Sean walks by, and
I'm like, there's a guy over there that's a foot and a half taller than me with abs.
Well, that's what's awesome for my high school kids is, like they'll come in and they'll deadlift maybe 315, and they think they're like, oh, that's badass, because like they're the strongest kid in their weight room. Then like we were talking about, like my wife, right? Then they watch her, they're like, well, she just beat me on that deadlift, and she's like a quarter of my size.
I wish I had the RPGs of the world back 20 years ago, 30 years ago when I was lifting.
Yeah, it just makes such an environment. So now the kids, like, I don't even need to sell the whole motivational like buy-in. They just see it for real life, and they're like, okay, tell me what to do. I want to do that.
Well, Brent, what I love the most too about your website that you guys are doing is, and Ben, you made mention of it. You got some people right now you're beta testing, but truly, this has been a beta test for fucking 5-6 years. I mean, this is not just let's throw something together. Ben, we talked about that briefly. You're like, fuck, I wanted to do this 5 years ago. I just didn't.
Well, we actually started it. I can't remember what the hell the thing was called, but it was Chris Wood, our IT guy. He had the servers in his basement. And it was like something Black Square Box or some crazy little website portal we made. And we started it up, and like even the exercise bank, like I was telling you, I put like 15 or 16 videos up there, and I'm like, all right, for what I want to do, I'm like, I don't even have the steady hands of the technology to pull off a procedure like this. I'm like, it was just crazy. I'm like, I'm in way too deep, and I'm like, all right, guys, we're gonna back off because I was kind of I was just kind of putting my toe in the water. And so I had a bunch of my athletes doing the program normal, but then I was trying to like, hey, submit to the Blackboard site, and we'll do the videos on there and stuff. And it just became this big clusterfuck of stuff. So luckily, I was like, yeah, guys, the website went down. I don't even know what to do. So we're just
Technology.
go back and this is when I was still writing programs on like a blank white email, and I would just go top to bottom.
Right.
And then somebody was like, yeah, you got to make this look fancy with colors and grids and all this. And I was like, no, dude. And then after like 5 years, and one of my athletes was like, all right, here's the thing that you need to do now. And I'm like, fine, I'll do it. And then we started getting into the modern era. But yeah,
it all makes sense, right? It all kind of comes together at some point where you just realize all the pieces are in place. And now sometimes I'm sure you look back at those old videos and go, who the fuck's that guy? What's that guy talking about?
I tell coaches now, I'm like, dude, if you look back a year ago at your own program and you aren't disgusted with what you wrote, to some degree, that means you're not continuing your education.
Right.
Like some of these people, I want to like send them like a refund, like $50. Like, I'm so sorry for what I gave you when I was young and didn't know anything.
That's what I say to my first 10 girlfriends too. I want to apologize. I'm really sorry. That was terrible. I want to send them a fucking card or something.
Yep.
His Amazon gift card.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm sure you've had better since, but I was just learning back then.
Yeah, for sure.
So let me, Brent, real quick. This is going to launch. What soft launch? Are we going to hard launch this?
Like right now we basically have the soft launch right now. That's what the beta testing all is,
Okay.
and we're just
we kind of chose like some people that we like. I specifically chose a couple of guys, and if you're listening, I'm sorry, but I chose a couple of guys that I'm like, this guy's going to fuck up a lot of stuff. So it's going to give us a good beta tester because I'm like, you're going to get thoroughly confused with this. And then, it's going to give us an example of like what all the problems could be. That's basically the point of a beta test, right? We're trying to figure out and I'm so glad we did because we're coming across this stuff and it's awesome because we can, when we do the launch, it's like we're getting closer and closer to like what will be the best possible product already.
And I guess no matter when you launch this at this point, and all the knowledge is going into it, the beta test, of course, is a necessary step in all this. This is just an evolution. It's just, I just see this site, like you kind of made reference to the replicating robot. I mean, essentially that's what we're seeing because I bet you're missing 100 things in the back of your mind right now about what needs to be applied. But you won't know until it comes up.
And it's every day. And like there's a lot of stuff that we're going to expand into. And I really wanted to talk about this. And we had these ideas of like, we're going to get into some strength and conditioning consultation and stuff because we have all worked in the high school space as strength and conditioning coaches and stuff, and we know the limitations. We know where the financial barriers are and all kinds of stuff like this. So we're going to get into stuff to where we are breaking down coaches or a technique for coaches. We're going to show them how the logistics of a weight room can work. How do you operate 50 athletes, or how do you run 50 athletes with 3 squat racks and 3 bars?
That's great.
All this stuff, and this is all the stuff that we do in person with these coaches, but also the barrier, like for me, would be, all right, we can hire you in for 6 weeks and then we're out. So now it's like, all right, well, how do we break in and make it financially viable for these high schools? Is we put the price point down and we put it all online and we explain to these coaches exactly what we're looking for and how to coach it. We're going to teach coaches how to coach. We're going to teach them how to use their space practically, and then we're going to even offer, there's going to be all kinds of branches. We'll get into, consultation for what they need to do to buy their gym. I know he's like revamping some high school gyms and stuff like that. All that stuff is going to be on there, and we're going to start to slowly just reach out and put all of the stuff that we've learned as coaches, and we're going to put it out there, and we're going to reach as many people as possible. And what I love about it is that we have been doing this with so many athletes over the years, we figured out good price points for people. It's not this crazy bullshit that I see online, like sign up for $285 for a month of training and all this stuff. And
you just get X's and O's.
You get X's and O's, and
the attrition on that's ridiculous.
We know some guys
too.
in the powerlifting world that we equally hate. It's like, come pay me $500 and do a 2-hour session with me. And all this stuff that it's like, well, first of all, you're not worth that. For 2, you're just kind of stealing people's money because this is a very easy thing for you to do. Like, if we wanted to have somebody come in and do like an assessment, we don't really need to do that. We can assess them as they walk over to the turf. We can say, hey, all right, internal rotation here, toes are ducked out, hips are tight, whatever. We don't need all of this formality and to charge you $200 for an hour. And it's like that with the coaching, and especially with this knowledge that we've gained in it being as expansive as it is now we can offer the product at the highest quality at the fairest price that we can.
Well, and I think every coach out there, and even at the level that I coach, which is minute compared to you guys, there's a level of self-satisfaction there as well. I don't want attrition. I don't want to start training somebody and not have them there to experience the process.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to get that. It's not going to be effective if it's not from.
I mean, that's
just
why we
doesn't
all
work.
coach, is to
Yeah.
see them succeed.
Exactly.
That's the only
if you're
reason
not
we're doing
that
what
guy,
we're
then
doing.
get the fuck out of coaching.
you're in the
Or you're
wrong
just
business.
going in for a money grab,
Yeah.
which we know exists on a very high level out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, we don't want that. It sounds to me kind of what you guys are putting together is more that, coming to the family, coming to the fold.
Well,
Let's
that's
make
what it
this
is. I mean, how many of these coaches at a high school level do you guys all know that are spending hours, unpaid hours there? Like, they want more out of this stuff.
Right.
And, a lot of these guys kind of bastardize the high school coach that is in charge of the weight room. And it's like, well, what else is there? There is nobody. Right.
At least
So-
that guy's volunteering time.
At least
to
he's
open it.
Absolutely.
volunteering.
He's
He's
probably,
trying to
he's
help.
probably the best coach in the world.
And he's out there and he's trying to research articles, but you just don't know what you don't know. It is what it is,
What
right?
a monster thing to be thrown into, like God, here we go. But that is when you need somebody highly friggin' skilled in that craft, is in a high school weight room.
Yes, and I
Oh,
feel
for
like
sure.
that we have a
Sure.
unique skill set because we have been in that weight room and coached those kids and dealt face to face with those coaches and saw their disconnect, what they don't know about coaching those lifters. We've seen what the lifters do wrong. We see what the school is not giving them. We see that the school's only paying them their $250 for a season to be a coach or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And we've seen all this stuff. So I know, I'm like, now this is a solution that we are going to have that a lot of people just cannot even know about. They don't know about the problem. They don't know about the solution. And if they do know about those, they haven't had the time in person with both of those demographics. I've sat down with ADs. I've seen the coach, the AD, and me. I've seen that whole relationship. I've seen the coach, the athlete, and the constant, whatever the hell I would be guy. I'd be like a consultation guy, I guess. I don't know what at that point. But I see all of these relationships.
Yeah.
And then that is where all of this stuff, that's the translation that gets lost. And then we're going to be able to offer that at a certain point.
Yeah, I see that sort of like, I keep going back to those older sites you mentioned, and kind of a collaboration of all that thought process with this sort of new age to do things and get things done with sharing information. Why hasn't this been done sooner? I mean, it's like, this isn't like fucking technology that wasn't
man.
available.
Yeah, we're
10
not
years
reinventing
ago.
the wheel, right?
No, yeah, right.
Well, yeah.
I'm in here pacing around the gym. I felt like fucking Steve Jobs, man. I got the iPhone in my head, and I'm like, these people don't even know they want it because they've never seen it,
I love it.
And that was how it was. But I knew that it needed to be there. And I would, like, you get into, like, some of, like, the elite FTSs and stuff.
Yeah.
And there's, like, this expansive library. It's awesome. It's like, all right, well, where does that go in my program?
Right. And
What's the set?
How do I
reps?
translate it?
How do
Right.
I translate, right? And that's where I'm like, all right, so now, and I didn't know that at the time, but now that is the language that I learned how to speak from like traveling this journey for this many years. And then that's where the stuff that's needed. And that, like, my goal for me is, I get in trouble by the wife all the time, and these guys yell at me because I'm trying to hand out free shit. I just like helping people, dude. If I see a guy get a PR, it gets me fucking jacked up, man.
Well,
So-
it's not that we're like, stop handing out free shit. It's like, hey man, we've all put in 15 years of handing
Yeah,
out free
well,
shit.
it's- yeah,
At
it's not-
some
yeah, I don't
point,
mean- yeah.
we got to be able to pay for
like, there's
for the
value,
mortgage.
there's value
Hence,
in
this
this.
is where
I'm going to
this
be
is
like
coming
that on this fucking podcast another year, bro. So I'm gonna tell you right now.
Yeah, this is why we're doing this site.
But
is-
we were,
Right,
very, I think
exactly.
you guys will agree, we were very conscious of what prices we were
Yes,
charging,
yeah.
and I don't know that any, if it happens,
Well, how
to
many-
blow up, it happens to blow up.
Yeah.
But I think the overwhelming goal why we decided to do this is because we actually do care about helping people. And like going back to the little kids thing, I know you can speak to this. I'm sure you can. I cannot tell you how many people to this day, how many dads and high school coaches and grade school coaches, all they care about is stepping on little kids' throats. Run.
No knowledge there, yeah.
And so to our point, if we can get our hands, because high school, again, I think is when most people make that jump to weights, although I think it should be done much earlier, but hey, whatever. If we had us in there, or a group like us teaching the right way, I think about the trickle down effect through those that are going to go collegiate professional career. When you have that platform at 13, 14 years old, you'll never convince me that doesn't mitigate some injury back, like down the road, or at least mitigate the risk.
Well,
further
that
down
was
the road.
that was one of the things. It was like when I was at the collegiate level, and I knew that I was going to start getting out. I was looking for high school jobs because I was like, we would get a freshman class in at a Division I school, and I'm like, dude, how do you fucking tie your shoes? Like,
right.
I'm like, you're
It's
a
an
Division I
epidemic.
athlete.
It really is,
So I'm
though.
like, I want to
Yeah.
go a step lower, and I want to be part of the fix of that
I
to
love
bring
it.
that kid back up to where you should be the Division I athlete you are, right? Like, you're good at your sport, but like, you need to be able to walk down the street.
I think we all agree, and I know everybody in this room does. Like, that is really where my heart is at too. I mean, just to be able to start at that young age, that youth, right, and teach them well. And that's the evolution of everything, really. And we're already sort of seeing it in sports, but I really love that part of what you guys are doing. I think I love it all, but that's just got a place in my heart, because I think at that high school coaching level and being able to touch these kids with a little more knowledge through that coach and through you guys, to me, I mean, geez, if you don't get on board, I mean,
when you see it, like when I'm coaching over the summer, at the high school, the football, and like he said, it's logistics. That's the thing they can't figure out.
Yeah.
But 8 years in the weight room, I've never had just one person. It's teams of 20, 30, 40, 50 plus kids on 12 racks. You got to figure that out. So it's like I figured out all the logistics, and then it's like when I come in, all they say to me is, I just don't want the kids standing around. I'm like,
yeah, and that's so true, because ultimately, even I can remember back in the day too, and still see it at some level, because I helped some high school coaching out, powerlifting, is you tend to sort of gravitate towards that one or two athletes.
Yeah.
Because they're just understanding it better.
Yeah.
And it's not because you want to neglect everybody else, but again, you just don't have the knowledge.
Their shortfall of their ignorance, right? So the better athletes are going to naturally move better, right? The guy that's going to take a little bit more time is the guy that doesn't know how to control his spine and tilt his pelvis and keep his chest up and all that stuff. So then you just start throwing him in. Well, he can't move correctly. We're just going to go lighter weight, and then he just does a million reps with terrible form,
Right.
and it
Falls
doesn't
off.
really do anything for him.
And that was the best thing that I got out of with Rick Perry, my old mentor, is he only let me really do the freshman coming in for football. So I had to learn how to teach the developmental side of things. And he was like, you can't really mess him up, like you can give him whatever you want to do kind of thing. But it's like, once I was able to like, I got to see the most things that I needed to fix. It's easy when you get like him walking in, like, I don't need to teach him how to do a goblet squat. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, now I got to figure out how to teach this kid that can't even sit down and stand up. And then it's like, that's where I got all these coaching cues from. It's just, I have to keep, I'll sit there and I'll say something, and they'll look at me like, "What'd you just say?" Then I'll say it again. Like, what? I'll say it again. And it's like I'm trying to say the same thing, but I say it 18 times, and then finally like,
and the bigger analogy here is that most of us, high school or grown up, we're that same mentality, right?
Yeah.
If we don't understand this at 40 years old,
Yeah.
I have to be treated like the freshman in high school,
Right.
else I'm not ever going to get it.
That's it. Just break it down like that. And I mean, we've gotten into stuff like this where we used to run seminars and we would coach coaches. And we started to see this very, very terrible disconnect where the art of coaching is lost. And you get these guys that just, even if that's their job to be a coach, the art of like being able to get people to move with your words and visualize themselves or visualize you without touching them and manipulating them, manually is just lost.
That is true. Yeah.
And so like, part of that, like what we can offer these coaches is like, we can explain, like, these are some cues that work. This is what you see. This is what a lot of people respond to. And then they can put that into their weight room. And like a lot of stuff like standing around the weight room, we show them, hey, this guy is squatting. This guy is on the side spotting. The side spotters are changing the weights. The guy in the back's back spotting.
Right.
Everybody has a job. And then we start to, and then, hey, this is how you put it into a program. This is how we make it sports specific. This is how we, now in sports specific, I use that very, very loosely. Sure. But this is how we make the work to rest ratio sports specific. We could say it like that, right? And then inherently we always have to get into them. We have to tell them and get them to understand that like these kids are going to get good at their sport by playing their sport. Our role in the weight room is a little bit different here than you think.
That's the coach's job to get them good at their sport. Our job is to provide them a solid athlete.
Because who's the first person to get fired?
Yeah, I know. That's why I left.
Well, we get this all the time, right? So I went and I did a consultation with Anchor Bay High Schools, and this was back in like 2008 or something. I don't know if I remember. But they every time you go in, how many times you guys they go, I want my kids to power clean. It's like, why? That's because that's what Alabama does. And I go, sir, Alabama gets the greatest athletes in the nation. I'm like, your offensive lineman over there has his entire ass hanging out when he tries to tie his fucking shoe. I'm like, the kid can't do a fucking power clean, dude. The kid can't do anything. I'm like, he needs to learn how to walk. We need to bring him back to fucking kindergarten and figure this out.
It's like you go in those weight rooms at that level. It's like they're probably training hard, but a lot being in that world. I've heard a lot of the the stuff that people don't hear, and it's just like, well, we got the superstar running back at Alabama, and like he might be like sitting on the arm, like the incline machine press, and it's like, well, why don't you train him? And it's like, well, I don't want to get him hurt because I'll get fired.
Oh, right.
And it's
Bet
just
you're
like
running that a lot too. Yeah.
How many
Same thing in the pro world, though. Same thing in the pro world
Yep.
where those guys, it's interesting. And I've been fortunate enough to train some of those guys in their off season, and I'll ask them, "What'd you do in season?" They're like, "Sat on a massage table, sat in the ice bath."
Yeah.
We did.
We
did
have
some TRX stuff. Maybe.
no wonder why you're hurt. But
Yeah, you're right. Where I'm like,
we've seen the program from the professional NFL strength coach. They bring their books in when we're doing combine prep with these guys, and we open it up, and I go, "What in the fuck is this? This is terrible. I want to slap this guy."
it's like old school 5x5
I was just
incline
you're
bench,
down
downloaded
to
a Wendler
bodybuilding.
531 off the internet, and you were like, "Oh yeah, put the."
So then
put the,
so
it's
we
an
go,
NFL logo on
listen,
there.
we're
That's
not
frightening.
We're not going to do
wild,
this. You
dude.
tell your guy that we did do this, and then you're going to go in and be way stronger. And they go, okay. And then after a couple weeks, they start flying. They're like, oh my god, this
had no
was
idea.
completely ass backwards.
It was like when my kid went to Wayne State. The only thing I cared about, I go, "Were you the strongest kid in there when you came as a freshman?" He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Fuck yeah."
When'd you have him? When you were 12?
What's that? No, like that Logan kid we're talking about. I had him for like 2 years.
I thought your kid went to
No, no.
Okay, you got me off guard for a minute.
I'm talking about him. I was
Oh.
like, that's something that I care about. Is I'm like, I don't care if you play good at baseball there. I'm like, I just want to know, were you stronger than like the freshman coming in from any
Sure.
other strength coach in there? Because then I'm like, I knew I did my job
That's
correctly.
that's
and
what
gets
it
where I
is,
get my
right? That's why
satisfaction.
a lot of this stuff gets, it falls through the cracks
Yeah,
because in that, and this is why I couldn't go and do the collegiate thing, is because I like black and white stuff. I did this, my guy got stronger. I like track athletes. I got them stronger, they ran faster, they threw further.
Right.
I don't like the fact that, you remember like Brock Lesnar when he went into the NFL, right? When he was for the Vikings, right?
Yeah.
He destroyed all the combine numbers, and then he just sucks at fucking football.
Right.
So I don't like that because that tells me I could get a guy, I could do my job to 500% efficiency and get this motherfucker strong as hell. But if he just sucks at football, he gets his helmet knocked off, they're going to look at me like I did a bad job, even though I did the best job I could have possibly done.
Right.
I don't like the gray stuff. I like black and white. I like numbers and stats. I like the black and white stuff. That's the way that it works for me. And I think that is a huge reason why everything falls through the cracks. There's no accountability, right? There's no, this is why this guy is good, this is why this guy is bad. If you get a guy, and we know guys that we went to school with, and they got a job at Alabama or whatever the hell this high-level school is, and they look like they're badass coaches. And then in all reality, what do? They just don't get the guy hurt.
Right.
And then he goes on the field and does what he does.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, he's an awesome strength and conditioning coach because he's at a high
Right.
level.
Right.
In my opinion, the greatest strength and conditioning coaches in the world are always going to be at private facilities because they don't have any shackles on them.
Yeah.
We are free to do experiments. We do legitimate experiments. And it's not this like talking about the training age of college athletes. This is why we understand this on our end. You can't even trust a lot of the scientific literature because if you look at the fine print, it's like, oh, these were 12 or 20 highly skilled athletes. What's that mean? They've been lifting for 2 years. The first 2 years that they've ever lifted in their life, freshman and sophomore year at the university level. So is this realistic? No, not really. Why are we not doing these? You look at like legitimate studies. The Soviets had legitimate studies. Why? Because they did studies on 500 Olympic level athletes that had a training age of like fucking 20 years or some shit, right? These are applicable studies. Now, in terms of the bro science stuff you hit it at earlier, and the anecdotal stuff, we do experiments where we know our people are highly trained because they've been with us for years, and then we do something. We put it in for 50, 60 lifters, and then we see, hey, shake the tree, see what falls down, right?
I generally hold anecdotal evidence in a much higher regard than clinical evidence, and I think both. I agree with what you're saying, and I don't want to shit on clinical evidence completely because sometimes it allows us to get funding for other studies, which is I think sometimes where there's a couple guys
on the same
Who invited this guy?
Yeah.
That's why he's
Right?
with us.
I know, really.
Well,
He's
on the same
talks
token,
everybody off the ledge, brings men down.
Listen,
Well, no,
it's-
so
I'm
we always talk
level-headed,
about this,
level-headed.
but this is perfect because we sit here and we trash the stuff, but then the first thing that we're sharing every day is a new study,
Going
and
like-
it pushes us down that rabbit hole because we respect the study, but we understand where the shortfall.
right,
yeah,
and
shortfall is.
like I'll send a study to the group chat, and then it will follow with, but that doesn't mean shit because I was on 100 untrained males. But
Yeah.
if that study allows somebody else to fund another study because again, remember how our government works. We're not allowed to do studies on things that probably matter a lot of times. I'm gonna get a lot of heat for that, but whatever. So we kind of do things in baby steps and walk like.
So
It's a necessary part of the
what he's
It's
saying,
absolutely
right?
sucks.
They're never going to give funding to the University of Michigan to do an experiment to increase the 1 rep max potential of a bench press.
Correct.
Right.
And if they do, the people aren't experienced bench pressers. There's a million factors in play,
Now,
but
So you're seeing in coaching that is essentially when people are trying to gather this information is ultimately they're trying to like manipulate data to fit their own need as opposed
Absolutely.
to
Well, you can always find what you want to find.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. Which is again why I think we all move back to anecdotal. Here's my thing, right? Guy, orthopedic surgeon, specialized on the board, whatever, yada yada yada, guy in the world, or Ben Pauli or Brent Odziana, and you want to learn how to squat.
yeah.
This guy squats maybe a plate, shaky as fuck. These two squat a G. Who are you going to go to learn how to squat? I'm probably going to gravitate towards like those guys are strong as fuck. They probably know what they're talking about.
Right.
This guy looks like he might die at any second right now. I'm probably not going to listen to what he has to say. Now that's a huge, whatever. But anecdotal evidence, I think, gets shit on by a lot of clinicians because maybe they don't do it or maybe they've never experienced it. And my thing, coming back to like this full circle mobility stuff, is my time in the functional world was eye-opening, and that led me to push the education level into the clinical world because I wanted to see what that was all about. And what I realized is we do a lot of useless shit, quite frankly, inside of a clinic. Most of it is probably bureaucratic in nature, right?
Right. Sure. Yeah.
And I know a couple good physical therapists that have branched off by themselves, given the middle finger, gone cash only. And I will tell you that I enjoy what they do because it's the same shit that we all do on a given day. And I always try to tell people this: there's no difference between PT and actual weightlifting. It's your load management. It's just your load management.
Well,
Like, it's just load
the hard part
management.
about that is that the guys that we know of that are they're gold nuggets of information. You go on their social media, they got 400 followers, and then that's like the standard of fucking knowledge now.
Yeah.
It's, oh my God, this guy's got 50,000 followers.
Oh, he must be a genius.
He must know what he's doing.
Dude,
He paid $8 for that.
I'm not
check
going to go
mark.
into names
Right.
because I don't want to get canceled, but some fuckstick, posts a video that says Jeff has, a million followers, posts a video that says Jefferson curls are bad, and scares the shit out of half of those followers and going no context to that post whatsoever. We're just putting random shit out there to fear trigger people, and it drives us crazy because we're going, the highest level athletes in the world do this shit. It's the old adage of like, oh, your back hurts, don't deadlift, don't squat.
We have professional football players that have come in, and they will not move a weight if their back rounds a little bit. And I'm like, dude, you're playing the highest impact sport in the fucking world. You don't think your spine has hit a man in a
Right.
partial flexion?
You better be functional in that position.
And way
Yeah, what
more
are we
force
doing
than you're
here?
lifting.
Like, you're afraid to deadlift 225 because your back rounds a little bit? What are we fucking doing here?
So trying to bring this information like full circle and make it accessible, and a lot of it it's been through reading clinical shit and then figuring it out on our own over the last 20 years. But by and large, you start to read the same studies over and over and over and over, and we know certain things, and then we applied the bro effort on that over the last 10 years.
Yep.
And to me, that's where the, like Ben calls it, the special sauce is like, not only do you have some dudes that are well educated, which doesn't really amount to shit, but you have all the just experience in the world inside those four walls. And we talk about, you said it the best, like your only job for the first year was to shut the fuck up and listen and watch. We all started that way. I know that I did. I know
Well, that's what's great about our gym is like, okay, when I came out and I started powerlifting, I wanted to have a buddy of mine coach me. And his first deadlift ever was 600 pounds. And then about 8 or 9 years later, he deadlifted 700 pounds. Fucking terrible progress, right? But when I started, and after I figured out I just need to train myself and take my licks, I blew my back out with like 285 in a deadlift. I got diagnosed with bulge disc. Oh my God, your life's over. We need to fuse your fucking spine and all this stuff. And now I am on the verge of pulling 900 pounds. And I took that entire journey. Now that is what gives us a very special eye on this, because when you have a lot of these coaches, they're very, very strong. Even when I was back in my jiu-jitsu days, I would have some of the best jiu-jitsu guys in the world around me, and some of those guys were terrible coaches because it was so natural for them.
Right.
They wouldn't understand they don't understand what it's like to not know how to tighten your back, or not know how to tighten your lats, not know how to hang your arms, not know how to not shrug when you're doing your lockout, all that stuff, right? So all that stuff gets in translation, and that's the stuff where you have to learn how to mix that drink with the books in the library, the studies, and the practical experience, right? squatting 1,000 pounds isn't in any of your fucking medical textbooks, right? It's not going to be there.
so
You're not
true.
going to learn it, right?
so
Nothing
true.
that you're ever going to read is going to prepare you to put that on your back. Nothing that you have in that medical textbook is going to prepare you for when they say bars loaded and you're the last deadlifter, the baddest motherfucker of the day, and you're thrown up in a trash can behind the fucking curtain. None of that stuff is in a fucking book. So if you're hiring this little motherfucking kid out of whatever Valley State University with a kinesiology degree that fucking squats 300 pounds, then you're shit out of luck when it comes to prime time. You know what I mean?
Oh, that's a clip right there. I'm going to cut that one out. Listen, it's so true, right? If it's not in the book, you can't do it. I mean, that's kind of what they're all taught, right?
Well, that's how it was.
My orthopedic. You're going to do what? I want to get back to strongman. Oh, no, you can't do that.
Well, that's
That
how
was his
it was. We both went to Central, both went through the same bachelor's degree, and you probably can agree on this, we had one professor, Tracy Ulrich, that was the only professor that I had for 4 years in the health field that taught
Dr.
us.
Tracy Ulrich, shout out. One of the greatest humans we know.
That taught us the only like real life scenario stuff.
Yeah.
The one that you have to go through is, like I was with him for probably 4 or 5 of my main classes, was stuff that was, it's not, you can't even do it in the real life. Like it has no applicable way to do it.
Talking about like this is a university setting, and we would do a class on the body blade, and so the lesson would be we're holding this thing, we're shaking.
Oh
thing
my
like
God.
this.
Perfect,
We're like,
perfect,
this
perfect
is gonna
example.
Rehab
is-
shoulders.
Perfect
Like,
example is he
talk
had
about
me demonstrate the bench press, and as soon as I got down on the bench and packed my scap, and he seen my chest come up, he get off the bench. That's horrible.
Oh, my God.
He goes, you
That's
need.
something.
Then he gets on there and gets himself all nice and flat on the bench, and he's sitting there. And he's like, "This is what you need to do." And I'm like, and this is a guy that's been our professor for Hammer's been there for how many
Isn't that
years now?
crazy?
And
Oh my
he's like,
God.
and he is trying to
easy
teach.
now. You're gonna get us excommunicated from the university.
Right, that's it. You won't
This was
invited
like
back.
when we go back and we talk to these people about it, like everyone has the same, and I don't really care because we can expose the deep state in here if we want to. But it's like everyone have the same type of a reaction to this, but then they'd be like, "Hey, easy," because he's like the head fucking guy.
Yeah.
And this guy, he came from California, and he was like a wellness guy. Now there was awesome like postural corrective assessment type stuff. The guy was a wizard. I love the fact that I did that, but when it came down, and this maybe I would equate what I learned at Central to maybe 5% of what it gave me. I would say this kid gave. I would have paid. I should have just gave him probably the majority of my $80,000, and I would have learned a lot more. And stuff like that. But it was this zero practicality disconnect. And the guy that we're talking about, he ran a random ass elective course. And it was a strength and conditioning elective, and we learned more in that, and that changed. I was going to go, I was in cardiac rehab, and then I'm like, I'm going to do kinesiology, because I was like 2 years before they opened up the program, but we knew they were going to open it up, so I was like, I'll just wait, whatever. But then I met him, and I was like, this is what the fuck I want to do.
But the funny thing is this guy was jacked. He was strong.
Right.
He's
went
done
down-
it.
He went
Practical
down.
knowledge,
He went
right?
down. He trained at West Side. We were huge
Oh,
West Side
geez,
guys,
yeah,
but that
right.
Even we didn't really know what that was at the time. But that
But
was
he did it in real life.
He did that.
That's-
He was Mr. Michigan natural bodybuilder. He had a pole barn at his house with $10,000 worth of equipment. Probably way more than that now. About it. Yeah. But yeah, just the guy
it.
lived it, and he explained the science, but then there was the practical application behind it, and then it was like, oh wow, this is what we're missing in the normal thing that I'm paying for with all my credit.
So now
hours.
we come full circle to the ideology behind exactly what you guys are putting out there with Coaching Revolution.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of bro science sprinkled in with a little bit of textbook and a little bit of
And I just don't know how you recreate that without the three of us.
without the
Or four of
experience.
us,
I mean, it
five
comes
of
down
us,
to
without all of
experience.
us.
Period.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we're talking about.
Don't forget about old Jim out there
Jim.
on the West Coast.
Yeah, we have Jim Surratt. He is a tactical strength and conditioning coach, right? Is what we would call him. He works. What's the base?
He's with Special Forces right now.
So
over there,
go back here. Who am I missing? Jim Surratt. Do I
Jim
know?
Surratt, yeah. So he's our other guy that's in the
Okay,
West
so
Coast.
he's the fourth horseman here.
Yeah.
So he's the guy that like spells stuff correctly.
Okay.
He writes like a poet.
Okay.
And so like I'll put some stuff. I'm like, this is my bio, and he's like, did you learn basic English? And I'm like, well, just fucking fix it, man. Come on. But he is one of the greatest brains that we have ever came across.
Truly,
Hence
yeah,
why we, I mean,
agree.
one of the most articulate guys with the knowledge that he has. And,
We should have had him zoomed in right
I know,
there.
right?
know,
Yeah,
right?
and he was
3 o'clock
former
in the morning.
he was strength and conditioning coach at Oakland, and then he got a job out there, and now he just trains. He's actually getting ready to go do a large conjugate
He was in
seminar.
the MLB before that too.
And
wasn't
he- yeah,
I think
he-
it was
you
You
MLB.
guys met him here in Michigan. I'm
Yeah,
gathering?
so
Okay.
he moved in, so he's in MLB, collegiate football, and then he came here, and he was responsible for what?
With Oakland,
Yeah.
I think he had like baseball and all those kind
Yeah,
of
so he was at
Olympic
Oakland,
sports.
and then he wanted to come do a multiply gym, and then me and him kind of hit it off. He became one of my really, really good friends, and then he ended up moving away to go to this new strength and conditioning position as for the tactical population for the military. And then he was one of those guys where we wanted to incorporate the articles and his knowledge base. Like the dude writes books for fun.
Like,
Yeah,
he
we got
got,
like 3 or 4 of his books on there.
We have
on the
3 or 4 of
site.
his books on there now, and he's in the process of writing like 10 other books, and he just that's like his bread and butter. He writes articles for Elite FTS.
It's easily digestible. Like, for
Multiple,
everyone,
he's
you know
wrote,
what I mean?
multiple articles for Elite FTS. 1,060 squatter, high level athlete in his own regard, awesome Olympic lifter, and he's coached across so many populations, like more than I think all of us combined in terms of the amount of athletes that he's had a chance to get on.
Different
and then
levels.
our guy, like our IT guy, Chris Wood, is one of my athletes, one of my multiply athletes, 1,000-pound squatter in the gym. He's going to eventually probably be a WPO competitor.
I love it, yeah.
The top 30 guys in the
He's your
world. for the
IT
multi-
guy. See, now that's the kind of IT guy we all need. God damn it.
He gets it. He
Yeah,
gets it.
that's awesome.
Yeah, he does get it. And then I think what's great about this in terms of the business end is that we are all friends outside of that. And so we can have just really black and white communication. I can be like, what the fuck is that? That's shit. That's terrible. We have to fix that. Or if I get angry, I can yell at them, and they know I don't mean it personally.
Listen, that's a
that we're
slippery
just gonna
slope, man. You guys are all friends, right? I mean, we can talk a whole nother podcast about how difficult that is sometimes to navigate sort of business. And
Yeah,
it is.
But you know your personalities well enough, and there's a certain level of passion behind what you're doing too. So it's a necessary part of all this. You can't just get 5 different-minded people that are all somewhat affiliated with the industry. And coaching and try to make it work. You're only making this work because of the thought process of you guys is all
Yeah,
very similar.
the easiest thing is that we all have like the same end goal with it,
Right.
And that's why it works.
Well, and we all
It's
know that
just-
it was born out of necessity, right? It was all of us have online people, and even Jim out there from the military base, he has an online client base, and he trains power lifters. He has girls that go to the WPO just like we do and everything. And everyone kind of when we were speaking about this idea, and even when I threw it out there, and everybody's like, "Yes, this is needed," and I'm like, "If we do this the right way, there's nothing that is." Operating like this right now. It's not just the X's and O's, it's not just the one thing. It's the culmination of all of the knowledge together, which is going to bring that uniqueness to it.
Is the idea? I know I'm getting way ahead now because we're going into a hard launch here in 2023. Has the idea been talked about to handpick and specifically bringing new coaches on? Is that sort of the growth of this?
No,
path?
we kind of want to just keep it with us.
Okay.
We
So
all.
you're not going to overdo it. I say that because Elite FTS, some other. I mean, they got carried away with everybody was sort of. This,
we don't want to
exactly right.
dilute what we're trying
Yeah,
to
that's
do.
what I'm
That's
Yeah.
exactly. So we looked, and this is part of what we had when in our business meetings, and we said, where was, some of the stuff you got to take with a grain of salt, right? Elite FTS was never offering programming, right? They were putting it on there,
Yeah.
and they would have programs. I'm saying it wasn't like
how
this
many
is what
people
we
ask
do.
to get
We
programmed?
started
no
looking
knock
at-
on them, but yeah.
We started looking at all these websites and we're like, where's the shortfall? Why can't we connect this information? How do we connect it like that? And then we have enough. My favorite thing about this is that we have enough diversity in our lines of thought that it will keep a good checks and balances system in
Absolutely.
place
Yep.
to where we're not just going to be drinking our own Kool-Aid the whole time and then get on one thing, right?
No, and I don't take that from you guys at all. As a matter of fact, you see you checking yourself more than most
And
guys
as
do,
we
so-
talked about in my podcast, like I will make it a point to reach out and have conversations with guys that are on a whole different spectrum side of things than I am with the weight training or with the school of thought and everything. And then we all do that because we know that that's the best way for us to grow. And we all kind of, you know how it is. And we're very, very close friends, but within a group of friends, everybody kind of does the same types of things because we start figuring out that's what makes you grow.
Right. Yeah, so you got to get that different perspective. Just have some open dialogue, agree or disagree, but maybe you can lend to your kind of the intellect to it all and make it all kind of work. And
yeah, like I'll get in there and I'm like, yeah, let's add a fucking blue band to this and some chains, man. They're like, dude, this guy squats 150. What are you doing? You're gonna kill this guy. I'm like, you know what? You're right, man. Let's just all right. You're right.
talk him off the ledge. That's where B-Rose comes in. Come on, man. I mean, seriously. I mean,
You
want me
should,
just
you
to sign
should see
this guy
his
up right
facial
now?
expressions sometimes when we do stuff. He's just like,
Oh,
Like
God.
I'll just look
No,
at the
walks
car
away.
and, like most of my, I get a good. I pretty much take up a small, like maybe a corner of the gym because it's all I really need. But I have ears, and I pretty much hear everything, and I tell these guys I'm their eyes and ears while they're not there. But these two, when they start going, and like again, if you haven't been to a lift at RPG on one of the days, you should come and check it out because we're all friends, but don't get it twisted. These two are directly competing when they lift on a day along with like,
Yeah.
and like I just sit in the back and I'm laughing. He'll come off the bench and be like, all right, we got to get this going. We'll go over there. He'll come out and be like, all right, I need to go. I'm feeling like I'm not packing the scap. And it becomes like, all right, well, who's going to win today? And so like, but it breeds this competition. And Ben, and Brent, you've said it, iron sharpens iron.
Yeah.
So even inside this small group, and maybe my adage is like, you guys wish you could be as mobile as me and free squat, whatever, but that's my PR. But watching these guys constantly compete and constantly try to evolve the programming, I don't know of another, like,
Yeah.
I would be interested to see some of the bigger online personalities. If you took a program from them from 2018 versus 2022, I wonder how much different it would really, I don't know if
I
he
would
was,
guess little to none, honestly.
yeah. And speaking of just coming down to like watch a lift, it's like now I have my high school athletes. I throw them right into our morning crew mix. They are doing the max effort lift with us now. So it's like,
Talk about buying, right? We have one of the, I think he is your guys' top guard in Michigan. As
Yeah.
a sophomore, right? This kid's fucking.
wow.
Yeah, so he's going to
But
be a senior
boy.
this year.
He's bench
but-
pressing next to Sean, who was a veteran in the NFL, did years, played for Penn State, the whole 9 yards, right? Talk about buying. That kid is.
He's lifting the bar off for this
he's
kid.
lifting the
so-
bar
Oh,
off
man,
for
what
a
a
guy
great
that's like in
experience,
your
right?
idol, right?
Yeah,
Like, he's like your idol.
yeah.
Like this is the stuff where it's like, all right, that's awesome, and that's that's just talking about.
It's
our
generational. That's what I like about what I like most about what you guys do. It really is generational with these
Right.
young kids leading up to these guys that have been experienced and been around.
Well,
a while.
that was kind of the way that we came up, especially was we came up in the under into the West Side system and under the elite FTS stuff where it was like, and there's a huge disconnect now with this, but it was like it is your fucking duty to pass this stuff down and help as many people as you can as you get strong. Because for me, like when I was coming up like that, like I didn't have a lot of guys that would do that for me. I had to get strong first, and
Unless
then all
you
these
paid
guys,
money.
yeah, or unless
right.
you paid.
Yeah.
I remember
Get
when I
to
was
the club before you can get in the club,
Yeah.
kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like now I'm like, all right, it's and again I catch flack for this all the time, but I'll be like a little high school kid. I'm like, what the fuck is this kid gonna be able to pay me per month?
Oh,
I'm
right,
like, all right,
right.
dude, just show up and work hard for me. We'll do it for free, whatever it is, and it's all that stuff. It's like there is a duty there, and because for me, it's not a very like triumphant thing to start beating dudes on the platform that you just know more than, right? It's cool. I like to be able to use the science to squeak out a win, but at a certain point, I'm like, I want all these guys to know the same shit I know so I
Absolutely,
could just
yeah.
beat their ass right outright.
Right. Share the secret sauce.
Level
right,
playing
yeah.
field. Yeah.
Level the playing field, and then we'll see who the real man is. Establish the pecking order that we've lost in society nowadays. You know what I'm saying? It's like that's a good thing for human beings, man.
It
Know
really
that
is.
You're
Yes,
better than some of these guys. You're worse than some of these guys. So don't get out of place. You can get smacked back.
No,
down.
everybody deserves a good ass beating every now and then. You got to give it to them, right? So, well, listen, guys, this was awesome. We can continue on with this for hours and hours and hours. Probably lunch break, come back, lunch break, dinner break, come back, see you in the morning kind of thing. But this has been a wealth of knowledge on my end because this is why I do this stuff. I love to hear smart guys talk, and I get to take in all that shit too and grow myself a little bit as well. Outside of that, I love the coaching revolution idea. To me, I can't wait to see that launch. And we'll talk about it again. We'll have you guys back on it for first year because I know there's going to be some growing pains there as well. Some things are going to change. Of course, that's a part of it. But I can't wait to see it, and we'll get it out there, and I'll share it, Ben.
Yeah, I want to
absolutely.
say something though. I want to say I appreciate you always supporting us, man. Like you guys came out. I mean, this guy is awesome. He's A1. He's came out. He's streamed seminars live for us. He streamed. I think he did a meet. Didn't he do a meet for us?
I was
don't
out
know.
there hanging out.
But yeah, out there hanging out. I mean, I really appreciate the support from day one, and I just want to say thank you for that.
Yeah,
Yeah, appreciate you
thank
guys.
Yeah, I'm doing what I love to do too, and I get to kind of keep my feet in the waters of competitive lifting as well. So, thanks everybody, and thanks for joining the Gym Life Podcast. I'll hashtag or I'll link all these guys to it and share their info and share their info on coaching revolution.net. So get ready for that. And then, of course, if you haven't heard enough about RPG, get down to RPG, have a lift with one of these guys, or all these guys, as a matter of fact. 5 o'clock in the morning, a little ambitious for the most of us, but we can get there a little later too, right, B-Rose?
You can, but then you would be late.
Yeah, I guess then you'd be late. You'd be missing out.
Yeah, you gotta
You'll
jump
hear a
in
lot of
wherever the bar's
chirping.
at. Yeah, you don't want to start at 4:05.
Fuck all that. I'm
guys
still
are
not
at
there
3:30.
myself, no. But anyhow, we're at 8 o'clock in the morning starting this podcast, if that tells you anything. So the earliest one to date. So thanks a lot, everybody out there, for joining us. Stay strong.